Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 25th, 2024 Board of Education meeting. Call to order of the meeting. Roll call with us this evening is Mr. Kressov, Mr. Lee, Mrs. Flynn, Mrs. Guernsey, myself, Mrs. Jacobson, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly, Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Rinaldi, and Superintendent Testani. If everyone could please rise to the pledge of allegiance, please. Mr. Testani, you want to start us off?
Sure. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public comment. If anyone is here this evening to give public comment, this is an opportunity. Just a reminder, when you come up to state your name and address for the record. Time limit doesn't seem like we have too many people here right now, so we'll leave it at 3 minutes. And just remember, you have to speak to agenda items only, please, in your public comment. Thank you. If anyone would like to come forward, you can.
Laura Benneman, PTA Council President-elect, 106 Bluewood Road. So for those who are unaware, the PTA Council is the umbrella organization for the entire town of Fairfield that collectively represents all PTAs in town. We passed the following joint resolution last night. The PTA Council recognized that there is a facility and a utilization challenges within our school system on both the west and east side of town. Mill Hill is overutilized. Dwight lacks air conditioning. Its septic system is failing. The building is in dire need of repairs. McKinley is Fairfield's most populated school and has multiple class sections that are over the cap size. The ECC has outgrown its current space at Ward and Stratfield due to the new kindergarten start date legislation, which adds pressure to Holland Hill. Jennings is in need of renovations and air conditioning. The list goes on and on. PTA Council voted in the majority to support the current draft of the long-term facility plan for its holistic approach in addressing needs on both the west and the east side of town. Rebuilding Dwight, not just for its K-5 student population, but to include space for the CLC and ECC classrooms, can help balance utilization on the west side of town. ECC and CLC special education students will always be welcome at Dwight. Providing a proper home for the ECC and in a location which is accessible to the west side students invest in the future of our youngest special education students. But also, by moving the ECC from Stratfield, classrooms can be repurposed in order to welcome students from McKinley so that our district doesn't return to portable classrooms. McKinley students will always be welcome at Stratfield. Initiatives like Rebuilding Dwight and investing in a new facility for the ECC presents opportunities to avoid the town-wide redistricting. To close Dwight would require students to be displaced to neighboring schools, none of which have the capacity to receive them. A town-wide redistricting, including impacts to middle school and high school students, is not what is best for Fairfield. PTA Council respectfully requests the Board of Education to adopt the current draft of the long-range facility plan and begin to address the many needs of our teachers, students, and the families without further delay.
Sorry, anyone else?
Hi, Rachel Gerber, 176 Butternut Lane. I have a son at Dwight and 2 more who will be attending within the next 4 years. We all can agree that Dwight is not an acceptable school in its current state. Although it has the smallest population of all of our elementary schools, it is still necessary for us to have our neighborhood school. Our school is not small because nobody lives on that side of town. Our school is small because programmers were moved out, like the CLC. This is an opportunity to think holistically about the long-term facility goals of our town. Rebuilding Dwight and adding special programming and a permanent ECC home for our youngest students is the most logical way to move forward. Rebuild, bring more students into a new space that has them. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dina Ryder, 400 Flintlock Road. This fall, I will have 3 children at Dwight in kindergarten, 2nd, and 5th grade. I'm here to express my support for the current long-range facilities plan, which includes a renovation/rebuild of Dwight with added-on space for ECC and specialized programming. There are many young children on the west side of town who either need ECC services or would thrive as typical peers. Given the current geography, it is hugely inconvenient or even impossible for some families to send their kids to ECC at Ward, Holland Hill, or Stratfield. A neighbor of mine quoted an hour-and-a-half bus ride for her 3-year-old son to attend ECC at Ward. Juggling the demands of work and other siblings, it became impossible and she had to pull him out. Can you imagine a 3-year-old sitting on a bus for 90 minutes one way every day? I don't think we adults would tolerate it. Why should they? Many of our youngest learners are simply too far geographically to get their needs met via ECC. I know a one-site ECC has been desired for many years, but it's at a truly centralized location. Unless it's at a truly centralized location, I see a great benefit to having 2 or 3 ECC sites. This would make it equally accessible for all of our young learners. We have the space and the opportunity to add a new beautiful ECC space onto the Dwight campus. Moving the ECC out of Stratfield will free up classroom space and perhaps allow for more balanced utilization in the future. Moving CLC back to Dwight from Mill Hill might also help utilization. The alternative idea that's been suggested of closing Dwight and creating a Greenfield Hill mega school is unacceptable and extremely short-sighted. I hope you will all support the long-range facilities plan as is. Thank you.
Lauren Efren, 241 Burr Street, Dwight, PTA Co-President, RLMS Board of Ed Rep. I ask the chair to give a little latitude as my comment pertains to the facilities plan itself, which is the agenda item being voted on tonight, specifically to the introduction by Angeles Papa George. It states, the primary objective of this plan remains steadfast to address the capital requirements of the school district, encompassing its 17 school buildings spanning approximately 2 million square feet. It continues, ending the final paragraph with ensuring its relevance and responsiveness to evolving circumstances. Remain steadfast. Requirements of the school district. Responsiveness to evolving circumstances. It is this body's job to address the needs of our school buildings. We need more space. Dwight has a building that needs responsiveness, not inaction. The ECC needs space. We can give them a permanent home. By incorporating it into Dwight, we will have higher state reimbursements. This is a solution. What is your role? What will you do tonight? Will you push an agenda for due diligence on behalf of finance and budget? Will you split hairs on policy? Will you address the needs of the facilities you were tasked with maintaining? Please, will you act upon the plan that has been set before you? Will you push us into the new era when worrying about enough space, clean air, and adequate functioning buildings is a concern of the past? We need your action without further delay. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christine Higgins, 129 Cedar Road. I am the mother of a rising first grader at Dwight, and my husband and I are both high school educators. And I can see it from the other side of the line. Our students need stability, and there's a rise in anxiety and distractions in our students, and they need consistency, stability, and academic continuity. So I'm going to come at it from a social-emotional learning standpoint, and I think that that is the best for our students at Dwight. If we could please consider building on the 30-acre campus, provides a lot of space for ECC programming, and it is my hope that you will consider that campus as a possibility. Thank you.
Good evening, Greg Bosch, 470 Jackman, a member of Stratfield's community. Imagine my surprise to hear just 2 weeks ago, certain members of this board again suggest Fairfield should close Dwight. The problem is we need more classroom space. That's what veteran members of this board told the State Board of Education. And the suggestion is to close the school. I'm going to read from meeting minutes from last fall, Stratfield's community conversation. Mr. Peterson stated the Board of Education was never serious about closing Dwight. It would take a lot of capacity offline in addition to displacing students. Mr. Peterson noted a member of another town body with no insight into the process went to Dwight and told them that the decision had already been made.
Sorry, Mr. Bosch, if you could just speak to the item that's on the agenda, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Happy to do so. And yet, just 2 weeks ago, without some seismic shift in any relevant metric, without any explanation what this town wants Dwight's land for, without a plan to replace Dwight's classroom or add the additional space our district needs, the suggestion is again to close a school. To state it plainly, the contradictions have parents feeling jerked around. And in BOE meeting minutes, this board has already concluded closing a school risks future construction reimbursements from the state, removing the solar panels on the building will incur penalties, and there is little savings because of course you have to keep all the teachers and the staff for the students that are displaced. Before this board, for the first time in 8 years, due to new facilities committee leadership, is a plan that recognizes the needs of our students and teachers across the district, including the ECC. For the first time, it recognizes the needs of not only our K-5 population, but also our special education population, like ECC and CLC students. To the less informed, it might look like a school construction project for Dwight, but that is not the case. This is a plan that can solve utilization at Mill Hill, provide the ECC with the space it needs, locates ECC facilities on the west side, solves utilization at McKinley by bringing students to Stratfield, and does so with minimal redistricting. It's a plan that Stratfield and McKinley and Dwight and Mill Hill and North Stratfield and all the other schools you heard from tonight through PTAC endorse. And for the first time, it comes with a type of whole town unity born from whole town solution. Please pass the long range facilities plan tonight. Thank you.
Is that it? All right. Thank you. Presentations, preliminary fourth quarter report, Ms. Laborious.
So this is the board. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you the fourth quarter update. Not much has changed since we last spoke. I would just ask that you turn to the memo in front of it. The first page that looks like this is but it's the top is Fairfield. So this kind of year, I just want to walk through what's changed since we last spoke with you. Not much has changed. So I'm just going to kind of highlight over the year what's happened. So personnel services, we've been speaking about a gap that we've had in personnel services. In funding because of much needed staffing that were hired this year and also substitute needs that we've spoken about previously. That trend continued. We're now we're projecting about $830,000. That's about on track. We closed with our final payroll today. And so we just have an accrual payroll left, so we should be pretty close there. Fixed charges, we still continue to see a surplus. That's our insurances, including the health insurance. The majority of that surplus is due to health insurance, election coverage being slightly different than health insurance at levels of coverage. And then also slightly more retirees than we originally budgeted that we're also taking up the insurance, which is a revenue for us because they pupil personnel, we're projecting about $9,000, about $1 million gap there, which we've been speaking about, mainly due to the, we've talked about this, the excess cost state reduction in reimbursement percentage rate. In addition, we had about $600,000 of additional costs associated with that age change in legislation, keeping kids a little bit longer during the year of their birthday and also because of an additional outplacement that settlement that came up recently, and that sometimes happens at year end. School expenses, we spend out our school expenses. That's the school's budgets. They do a good job buying what they need for the schools. Support expense, that's about $254,000. Balance to cover the offsetting needs. That's a reconfiguration of some IT accounts, handling some of the services in-house, resulted in the savings. In addition, copier savings, which I think is here. We did see some copier savings because we invested in those universal readers. And then in maintenance, operations, and transportation, that the bulk of that is due to, we've been speaking about the utilities. We budgeted at all-time high energy rates. So electricity is down about 36%. And since the time of budget, we built that budget. And then the fuel oil is down about 27%. So we saw some savings there that offset those needs. And we're looking to come in at zero. I'll talk to you, I think 2 more agenda items about the transfers. Not much has changed there either from our last presentation. We do plan to spend out the full maintenance service accounts. As we have seen some additional favorability since this May 31st report in transportation, as well as in the utilities, after the May month close was finalized. So we're still finalizing up until June 30th. People make changes, and then we go into our 13th month of reconciliation, and we'll have our final report in September. So, see if there's something.
Questions?
To the chair, questions about the maintenance line. Should we just wait until item 5A? Okay. And sorry, one other question. So just as a reminder, the personnel services shortfall. Once again, can you remind me how much of that was due to new hires? How much of that was due to something else?
Or, gee, I apologize that I don't have that at the tip of my brain, but roughly, I can tell you the number for subs.
And that's my previous answer. If there's something from 5A that's going to influence a different agenda.
I didn't think.
I don't know what we have now, you're asking. Yeah, so personnel services, so the negative roughly 830. About 500,000 is due to the substitute line. So, long-term and short-term still combined. And then another 190,000 was because of summer school. So having more attendees than we expected in summer school. And then the balance of that would have been additional hires prorated throughout the year. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Old business, review and discussion of facilities and summer maintenance projects. Mr. Papa George.
We did share with you in the Friday packet and stack of budget and we want to do priority list. So we shared that with you in the last one, so I wasn't gonna go line by line on that unless you'd like us to, so I just did a quick breakdown for you guys. I'll just run through the schools real quick. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to have. Fairfield Ludlow High School, we have our bathroom project underway and our lighting project underway in the auditorium. Ward High School, we have our boiler burners going out to bid, going out to bid. The Fitz House rooftop units are being replaced. The crane lift happened this week, so we're moving along those. Baseball field diamond dugouts are due back from the architect end of this week, beginning next week. Walter Fitzgerald, we have the kitchen project underway. Woods, we have the AC project underway. Roger Ludlow Middle School, we're doing a large heating and cooling loop repair. That's why it's offline right now. Tomlinson, the 53-week lead time for the chiller has actually been lifted to the roof this week as well. So that's another one moving along.
Borough has a controls project underway and a fire alarm project underway. We are in the process of replacing the front sidewalk that's been a problem and concerns about safety. I'm sorry, I have camps listed here too in case. McKinley just got word that the chiller is going to have to be either repaired or replaced. We're still working through that, but that's going to be a large project, hopefully taking place this summer. North Troutfield has the AC project, Osborne has an AC project, and those are the larger projects that we currently have.
Yes, Mr. McNally.
Two immediate questions. Any ballpark idea for that McKinley chiller?
Ballpark,
Like,
around just under, so let's say between 2 and 3,000. If it needs to be replaced altogether, so we're still diagnosing the problems. The problem is it's not an off-the-shelf chiller, it's specially designed. It was a special build when they built the school because the piping comes underground, so to get it retrofitted to something we could buy off the shelf as a mass production unit, we'd have to dig up the whole parking lot and repipe the building, so we're kind of stuck with replacing the kind, which was not off the shelf. But we are trying to we are looking into it. If you remember last summer, chiller 1 was failing with a factory rebuild on it, so we're looking at all the options available.
okay, thank you. And then this is obviously very minor, but I'm just curious for the line 16. How is a split unit AC over $8,000?
That is for 6th level high school.
No.
Jennings.
I'm sorry, my line 16 is Fairfield level high school.
Well, the only reference to Jennings on this entire page.
That is the split unit,
Right.
$8,000. That's the going rate for what we pay for split units installed.
Do what?
Used to be around 5,500 or 6.
Sorry. Exactly what is a split unit?
Split unit is, in a residential, they're called ductless units. You have the mount inside the building, we mount the head that's controlled, it does heating and cooling, and then outside we put a condenser unit, and then we wire and pipe between the two.
It wasn't what I was picturing, so that
It's
explains,
not like a wall unit.
that explains the cost. Thank you.
Not a window air conditioner.
I say I can go to Fairfield Shares for you if you want, but, all right, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, just piggybacking on McKinley. What exactly is the issue there and what is down?
The chiller, which is the unit that sits outside in the parking lot, it has, it's got a lot of moving parts in it.
I sorry, inside the building, what is affected because of the failure?
The air conditioning is currently affected by it. We are running, but days like today are not necessarily as comfortable as days when it's cooler out and hit capacity.
I guess my question is, worst case scenario, we don't have this fixed by the end of the summer and the kids come back at the beginning of the school year, it's hot. Is the whole school affected? Is it part, like, are they gonna be able to manage?
We would be able to manage. We wouldn't be able to get it as cool as we want, but it wouldn't be as warm as any of our buildings that don't have air. So we'd be able to manage within it. It's the only, so it's got a lead lag. It's got a primary and a secondary. So the primary one is number 1 right now. The second one is declining. So that'll cool the building. But when you get really hot and humid days, it's that second that'll bring down the temperature. So we can still run with the 1. We just wouldn't be able to get it down as much as we would like.
And I didn't see the, with regard to Ludlow and the bathrooms, could you just remind everybody for the public, the implications of that project to the property and access?
So because of the project going on and we're opening up the walls, it's an older building, the piping within the walls is all asbestos coated and insulated. So by state legislation and state standards, we cannot have anyone under the age of 18 on the campus, which is why we've had to relocate kids' activities off the level The Ludlow sports groups are using Tomlinson currently. They have the field and the gym use there. So we were able to accommodate them right up the road.
So none of the school-based athletic programs are affected other than having to be located somewhere else for their summer training.
Correct. They're remote.
Okay, and I know it is not necessarily on here but because it's a maintenance project, I know at Riverfield and Burr, a good portion of the air conditioning is down because we've been waiting on parts with long lead times. Is there any update on that?
Don't have those with me tonight, the update on them. I know we are still anticipating them to be up and running before school starts, but as you said, there are long lead times for some of these units. These pieces to the end, I should say, the condensing coil are a big cost.
Was it not a circuit board issue too? Isn't that what we were waiting for at both schools?
For Roger Ludlow Middle School, we'd say, I'm sorry, for Riverfield, it was the control board. For Burr, it's the control board, the condensing foil, and the motor pump.
And at Burr, am I correct in that a larger portion of the building is down because of this than?
It's more noticeable at Burr because of all the windows, you get the heat in there, so that's why you're noticing it more. Thank you.
Mr. Lee.
The spoilers at McKinley, we have to special order those, obviously. What are potentially looking at the lead time for that for ordering to delivery?
The chiller unit?
The chiller, I'm sorry.
We're still working with the manufacturers. We're working directly with Train to get lead times and what our options are.
I have a question, and I don't know if this is a question for, Mrs. Laborious. So a lot of these items here, I get the year-end funding because we're gonna vote on that later for the ones that are in yellow. The ones that are in green, that says pending restoration of funds. Can you just tell us, Mr. Papa George, what that means?
Those are, as we explained at the last meeting, those were projects that we put on hold when we had the freeze and that we're anticipating getting the funding restored and then we will move forward with that.
So, Mrs. Laborious, can you speak to all of these items that are in green?
That's right. So the funds have been restored, but within the priority, so above and beyond the restored funds from internal restoration, so many of these are already processed.
So these
Yeah,
are,
I just want to know what, like, are all the greens funded, paid for, moving forward? There are no more pending restoration of funds. Funds have all been restored for everything that's in green.
Correct. Unless Angelus reprioritizes with the chiller. So depending on the pricing of the chiller, in the next 2 days, they'll get the finalized quote. And then depending on that, they may have to pause on some of these items. Is that right?
we would pause on tan with the green ones.
Which one would you pause?
On the peach tan color ones,
Oh, okay, so you would
Hearing.
pause on what we're gonna vote on tonight.
yes.
So this is slightly different.
Can I just add more to that?
Think about it for a second here.
Okay.
Brought the
Yeah, because the one that's in the board packet, all of these have been funded and have been purchase ordered, they're in process.
So pending is not a thing anymore.
Not from this.
Okay,
Vending is no longer a thing, but obviously the McKinley issues are unexpected, so it's gonna have to come from tonight's approval of transfers.
So to
sorry,
get,
sorry, Mr. Lee.
I'm sorry, to go back to the chiller then, there's gonna be a custom made. It's not off the wall, it's custom made. And seeing what's in tan, we're potentially looking at over $100,000 for the chiller. Does that include the work to install it? 3 to 400,000.
Said 2 to 3.
2 to 3, I'm sorry. 2 to 3.
So I don't see where the other 100,000 would come from off this. If we look at all the tan,
Sorry, is the McKinney store on this list?
It is on the list without a number because we.
18.
It's not on the one you got in the Friday package, but it's on the list. He's looking.
Oh, okay. Oh, there's no cost.
TBD.
Ah,
If you look at what's in tan, I only count up to 100,000, give or take.
Right, and that's on your transfer list, which is the next item on the agenda. So if you add the 2 doors, if you put the stage flooring for 100K, there are a few things that were in process that. Yeah, so that if within his internal items that he just processed these last 2 weeks, recs that are still going because, you know, they haven't been approved by the town, work can start before June 30th, which would be this weekend. Of those, if he gets the quote, decides that he preferably would rather needs to do the chiller, and that's more of a priority to move forward, he'd pause on some of those other items that are already in the workflow queue in process, we have the funding for and move forward on. Does that make sense?
So it still doesn't include, it's 200, 300 for just the chiller without the installation cost, because it's crew to do it. And because I'm assuming it's a custom made job, it's not gonna come overnight, and it's actually gonna be delivered later than something that's on the shelf. So we potentially could see a problem for another year and a half before we get this chiller.
We could be dealing with the former weather.
Potentially another summer also, because we know some things are delayed.
Some have taken 2 to 3 weeks. I would hope that this, they're getting better, so I would not be the case, but as you know, from switch gear.
Okay.
Mr. Asa.
Yeah, just a quick question regarding this, because it doesn't seem like even if we did clauses, we're gonna cover it. Since this isn't happening in this fiscal year, could we not do reallocations in next year's budget starting July 1st and pause something potentially there so we could cover it and not hold up these other items since they're not gonna cover it anyways?
We absolutely could. Obviously, we want to get it ordered as quickly as possible. It won't order without a PO, but we can work together to figure out where the best place to get allocated funds from, whether it's pausing this year or pausing next year. Moving some of that this year, next year.
Okay, thank you.
We'll definitely work with that.
Yeah, and I mentioned in my earlier comments about so there was a lag in the transportation billing, and we're finalizing the billing now, and that may result in a little bit of additional favorability to be able to afford some of the chiller. So that will be reconciled tomorrow, but it wouldn't require a transfer because it's in the same major category. So we'll let the board know, and we're advising the board, but it doesn't require a board vote because if transportation money frees up, you know, it can be, yeah, it can be utilized to offset this new need that came up at it, you know.
So to that point, if you don't mind. So if we don't do that, then that money from transportation potentially, if we didn't, would then go back to the town since we've already voted on the rest of this. And as in years past, if there was a little bit left, it would just go back to the town. Like, I just don't understand if we're not voting on it, is it automatically going back or does it just, how does it stay with us after the fiscal year closeout?
Yeah, it's within the major category, and given that Angel's identified the need before the close of the fiscal year, we would proceed with doing the necessary purchase. It wouldn't require a vote for the transfer. Yeah.
You think transportation is contained within maintenance?
Operations.
Within that major category, yeah, the operations category. Operations, it's called operations, transportation, and maintenance.
Mr. Krasnov?
Line item number 6, just for clarity, that has been funded already.
That has been funded. The greens have been funded now. Thank you.
Mrs. Lee, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, this is just a quick follow-up, and I'm assuming that this may have been discussed in committee, but when I look at this document for this year and then for the previous, outside of the 2 split units that Ms. Max and Kennelly referenced, I don't see any other projects at Dwight or Jennings. Can you just speak to that and how that, is it that there's no needs, or is it that you just speak to how that comes to be in this document?
So this document, this priority 1, 2, 3 list that we have is, we work with the principals every year to come up with priorities, what's there, what's needed. So like the split units in the spring, in the fall of last year, we had some holidays, we had to schools, so we were able to find some funding, we were able to increase the number of split units at those two locations to help out with the heat days. Not everything goes onto this list, day-to-day operations, maintenance, service, fixed all the time. We don't put those onto the priority list.
So there's no larger scale project that are getting held or have been discussed or are needed? A couple questions. I can use what was in our backup, so that's not the other one. I'm gonna go to the end of the page where you've got the summary, the green, the red, and the blue. Can you tell me what reclass for sped transportation, 219,764 under the column?
Line number?
Oh, sorry, it's not, it's at the bottom. It's not, well, I guess there is a line number, actually. You're right. 198.99. That's under the column, I guess, 1, 2, 3 over, so 1, 2, 3 board transfers. I don't remember transferring.
Last year, yeah, likely because I'll say what it could be, and then we can get back to you via the Friday packet if that's okay, but if I recall, there's a diesel and a gasoline charge. Diesel is for the special education, gasoline for the general transport buses. And so I believe they were all budgeted in one bucket on the gen eds transportation side. And this was reclassed because it belongs, the diesel belongs with the special ed. So I think,
Came out of maintenance projects?
well, I'm assuming she was tying back to the budget number. I'm not.
So the green with the, where it says, you're talking about 199 release for sped transportation.
Yeah.
That was the last year at this time. There was additional, there was good money in that. It was reallocated to these over here. If you look back a few pages.
23.
22, 23, the
Okay.
green ones that say completed, we were able to complete those projects because of that addition.
Okay, it's an internal transfer, but it wouldn't require a board vote, but it is.
Right, and they carried forward in blues, all those carried in forward, it's in blue, means they're still on the current.
They were put into the current, and we're gonna eliminate the back pages so that you'll have a fresh document.
And then the last one I want to talk about is one. Because there's 2 years in here, guys, right?
Yeah.
22, right, so that's why there might be a little bit, but. The district-wide planning and consulting slam redistricting for 101,000 in progress. Should that be stricken at this point, or is that closed out, or what's the story with that $100,000?
We're just in the process of closing it out. PES is the group that actually bills us for the SLAM work, and it's a process. Yeah, the bill comes through CES.
They hold the contract, but.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a slow process, otherwise it will be, but we're not moving forward with anything. It's just.
So you're waiting for CES to give you a bill?
Yes. Everything's slow.
Okay, that's all I had. Anyone else? No? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Approval of 2024-2035 Fairfield Public Schools Long Range Facilities Plan. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the 2024-2035 Fairfield Public Schools Long Range Facilities Plan. Can I get a motion? Mr. Krasnoff, seconded by Mr. Lee. Okay. At your desks and posted online, there are several amendments that have been posted to this item. Handouts 1 through 4, they're at your desk and on. Pardon me? Oh, sure, if you, oh, sorry. Sure.
No, I just-
Yeah, absolutely. Go
So
ahead.
just one update that was made known earlier this afternoon is that the access to the Mona Terrace property by the Board of Education will no longer be at the end of May of 25. The earliest that would be is May 30th of 2026. So they will be giving a Child's Garden an extra year prior to vacating the property. But we have been assured that Board of Ed will have first dibs on the property at that time if they so choose to do so and act upon it.
Mrs. Maxine Kennelly.
To that point, through the chair to the superintendent, at what point in time, because obviously anything involving that had involved expenditures, and projects, at what point are we even going to get, obviously it puts less pressure on getting that information. Yeah, we certainly should be able to get it accurately now, but what would be the timeline on any of that information?
Well, because we had planned for June 1st of 2025, I think Angelus was pretty close to finalizing numbers.
I
So
can actually give you some estimates
Yeah.
during the facilities committee update if you want them.
Okay.
Mr. Peterson,
Say first dibs on the property. Do we,
first right of refusal. I
right
believe.
of refusal or
for the whole area that we were looking at? Because I know in Board of Selectmen, they were still talking about putting Board of Health and maybe in some of that spot. Like there was the last discussion that I saw in a public meeting with the Board of Selectmen, it was not this entire chunk is going to the Board of Ed. It was still in discussion.
my understanding was we would have access to the parts of the property of the building that we toured. There was no mention of Board of Health or any other space going and commandeering in there.
Okay. So to clear that, it's still the senior center would still have their.
Correct. Senior Center's not going.
The same space that
Same space we viewed.
toured
Same alteration,
a year later.
We have the first right of refusal.
Yes.
so we were told.
Okay. Thank you. All right, amendments. The first amendment up, I submitted to board. And this is to amend the Fairfield Public Schools 2024-2035 long-range facilities plan, first read, red line, and clean read to insert Osborne Hill Elementary School status fiscal year 2028 seed funding after the HVAC security project. So in your red line version, oh, sorry, can I get a second? Mrs. Flynn. Thank you. So this is about Osborne Hill. So for the seed funding, Dwight and Jennings has that in here. That's what came to us as the working draft from administration. But I've recently realized in the last facilities committee meeting that Osborne Hill had been unintentionally, of course, and inadvertently left out. So I'm proposing this amendment to not leave Osborne Hill out of this document with that. And to be consistent with all the other schools where they have statuses on their building status. So Osborne Hill already has the HVAC project in here and the security upgrade project. So just looking to add their seed funding, which again was completely left out unintentionally on our end. So that's it. Very simple amendment. Mr. Asa.
Yeah, just, I have no issue with Osborne Hill's project or anything. I don't support this amendment just because it conflicts with my amendment. So that's the reason in my amendment that we'll be bringing forward later, it says to reference the waterfall instead of putting it in here. So that's just, I just wanted to say that.
Okay. Anyone else?
For the record, this is in the waterfall, correct? Osborne Hill. What year is?
It's on the waterfall, but it's not in this plan. So it depends, I guess it depends, yeah. I don't want to talk about the waterfall because the waterfall's not on the agenda tonight, but yeah. So, which of course we don't vote on. Mr.
I just want to thank you for adding it for consistency.
All right, any other comments? Public comment on adding Osborne Hill. No? Okay, all in favor of adding Osborne Hill? Mrs. Rinaldi, Mr. Krasnov, Mrs. Flynn, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Jacobson. Opposed? Mr. Peterson, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Maxon Canal. Oh, sorry, Mr. Lee. Opposed? You were opposed? Okay, so 1, 2. Sorry, I gotta do it again. In favor? Mrs. Rinaldi, Mrs. Jacobson, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Flynn, Mr. Krasnov. Opposed? Mr. Lee, Mr. Asa, Mr. Peterson. Motion passes. 5-3. Mrs. Maxine Canali was not in the room for the time of the vote. Thank you. All right. Mr. Peterson, you are up next, so I will let you do your motion.
I would, as listed in handout number 2, I would like to make a motion that in the Fairfield Public Schools Facilities Plan 2024-2035 draft, included to be dated June 11, 2024, to delete the following text from page 6. I won't read it all, but my thought was to remove the reference specifically to Mona Terrace. Because as we heard in 11th meeting, it was not an assured thing. And it just seemed inconsistent with the purpose of the document to say, this is our current status, this is our current use and condition of the facilities throughout the Fairfield Public Schools, which currently Mona Terrace is not. And as I mentioned in my rationale, I am on record in writing and
Before we get into it, let's move the motion and get a second. Sorry.
I would like to move the motion. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Asa, thank you.
I appreciate
Okay,
that.
no problem.
I'm in favor of using the Mona Terrace property. I'm not sure it's consistent to do it in this document since it's not a facility that's under our control.
I have a clear point of clarification. In your motion, you ended with conference and the administration office. Therefore, that would have been leaving the security system and safety issues, provide increased security and safety measures, and the HVAC unit replacements inside of the document under Mona Terrace. That's been an oversight. I just want to make sure that you are getting what you want on the record here.
I understand.
So we could leave that in for.
No. I'm sorry. I apologize. That was my oversight. I don't know if I can move to amend my own motion.
Someone would like to move to amend the own motion, then they can. So do you just want to state what the motion is?
Second.
No, you
Right, so-
move the motion.
Well, I
Amend
can,
his motion.
You can move the motion, I can second it.
I would like to make a motion to amend JP amendment number 1 and handout number 2 to include after conference/administration office, the 4 lines above long-term on page 7.
Mr. Asa seconds the amendment to the amendment. Discussion on the amendment to the amendment only to take out security and HVAC. The public on the amendment and the amendment only to take out only the security and the HVAC from the Mona Terrace motion. All in favor? Mrs. Canali, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Amendment to what amendment?
Mr. Peterson did not include on his reduction of Mona Terrace out of the document, the security and the HVAC.
So I apologize. So this amendment is already on the table.
Yes.
Okay, I somehow think you were amending the previous one. apologize.
I just noted for him that the 2 sections were not included in.
And much appreciated.
Security and the HVAC items.
Gotcha.
He has amended his own amendment. Mr. Asa has seconded it.
Thank you.
And now we are voting on that amendment to take out those items from Mona Terrace. All in favor? I mean, the amendment only. Mrs. Rinaldi. Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Maxine Canali, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Guernsey, Mr. Lee, and Mr. Krasnoff. Opposed, Mrs. Flynn, Mrs. Jacobson. Motion passes 7-2 to amend to take out those 2 sections. Back to the amendment as amended. Anything else? No,
I would just like to appreciate the opportunity to fix it to reflect what I was trying to get at.
no problem. All right, any discussion on this taking out Mona Terrace? Mr. Krasnoff.
Thank you. As we just heard from Superintendent Testani, we have first right of refusal. That being said, I feel it should remain in the document so it has a place and a life until otherwise stated.
Anyone else? Mrs. Maxine Canali.
I think what was compelling to me is the reminder that it's not our facility. And if this is the Fairfield Public Schools facility plan, you know, when we were doing work at St. Emery's, it would be in our budget, but I don't believe we ever put that in our facilities plan because it was a rented space. So that's why, again, I've obviously been very keenly interested in Mona Terrace. This has nothing to do with my interest in that property for the ECC as a way to alleviate the situation with that. But this made sense to me.
Mrs. Bernstein.
I think I have a question, maybe it's through the chair. I actually really appreciate this information living in this document. Not sure if it's appropriate, but if not here, then where would it live? Because I like seeing it together because of what I'm hearing tonight about the right of.
Well, the motion before us is to take it out of our plan. That is the motion.
Right, but I guess through the chair to Mr. Peterson, where would it
Where would
live?
Mona Terrace live?
Well, I have no specific answer for that, but we have put ideas for, you know, placeholders on the waterfall for. You know, we did that for Walter Fitzgerald for years. So that's where it lived until it became a hard and fast project. But I mean, that might be a question for Mr. Papa George.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe I missed it in reading it, but is central office in the facility plan? So to me, it's housed in the same way that we keep track of, I mean, on the project grid we were just looking at, there are central office projects. I think that's exactly what Mr. Papa George, I completely agree with your point that I would not want that information to be lost. But we have staff who keep track of precisely that. I mean, I don't assume that our new transportation building is not going to have needs met just because it doesn't exist in the Fairfield Public Schools facility plan. So,
That wouldn't be a leased property.
but we don't have central office in here either, and we address central office needs. So Mona Terrace is not our property, therefore again, now I'm repeating myself, but,
So, yeah, my feeling is, since we know that this is definitely a space we've been guaranteed to have in 2 years from now, whether we use it or not, I think it's incredibly important to understand what the deficiencies of that property we've been asked for. What are the costs? What are the operating budgets? How are you gonna fix it? How much money is it gonna cost, et cetera. So this details, even though the money's not on here, this details what the deficiencies of that space is that we've been told we can utilize. And without anything on the interim, I go back to hearkening, well, without something in the short-term space, whether it's a year or 2 years from now, we're left with a very large gap, leaving things at Holland Hill and leaving things at Stratfield. And so for me, this is why we ultimately put this in this plan as a committee, brought it forward to you as a committee, which of course people are free to take it out. But now that we actually have this information, that we are guaranteed to have it, I'm very comfortable leaving this in so that it is very apparent to everyone, the public, other town boards, what that space actually needs to function for an ECC. Mrs.
And just to follow up on that, I really appreciate the amendment and take heed of the concerns, but I think that we're looking at a kind of a new document. This is the first page that's ever been cited as the Early Childhood Center in full totality. And seeing it set up like this, I get a little nervous hearing this news, hearing the right of first refusal to parse this and leave a very large gap that I think having it all live in one document shows us a path forward, and I get very nervous to remove a large block of that.
And if we
So
don't use it, I mean, this isn't like locked in like a vault.
That's my thoughts.
Can always be changed, right, Mr. Issa?
I don't have a problem with the amendment, with the understanding that we have talked about before, that this document isn't one and done and final, that we can always revisit it
Of
and when we
course.
get closer. I would feel comfortable when we got closer to the time. I understand what Mr. Testani says and what he's been told, but until we have something in writing and, you know what I mean? I would be more amenable to adding this back in a more robust way when the time comes and actually when we have the information about what we need. Because that discussion is going to have to be had, and it will become a waterfall item because it's going to be a lot of money. Enough money to be on the waterfall and bonded.
Well, we already have ECC on the waterfall, but at the end of the day, I disagree for the opposite person. Until we decide we're not going to use it, let's leave it in this plan. So Mr. Krasnov.
I was about to echo what you said. Just like Mr. Issa said, we can change the document, Why not leave it here until we hear otherwise? Because we're being told as of today that in 2026, we could have the building.
We might not want to wait to 2026. So I fully understand what you guys are saying. We might want to say, well, we can't wait 2 years on McKinley. We need to go to Trumbull and get that space back. We need to put more into Holland Hill. We need to sprinkle ECCs into other places. So at the end of the day, they're all other alternatives, but we're not there yet. At this point, this is what we've explored. So, Mr. Lee.
Just for the record, not as we sat in this facility committee, thinking that we're gonna get it in 2025. It's kind of heartbreaking that he's extended a year. So my questions through you to the superintendent, are we guaranteed 2026? Like, he's not gonna go and renegotiate any kind of lease, because we spent time even figuring out how much things are to come to the board for 2025, how much things are for that building. You delayed it a year. I'm not coming back to this board saying, oh, by the way, it's this price, when in reality, we know 2 years from now, it's not gonna be. So do we have a guarantee, the Board of Education has it in 2026 to refuse it or take it?
You have a guarantee? You're asking the wrong person. You'd have to ask.
Well, what were the exact words that he told you?
We'd have first right of refusal.
So
think there's
it's not, it was a guarantee for 2025.
No guarantee.
Legally, that's.
All right, so I think if there's any other questions on this, or is there any questions on the deficiencies actually in here for them? So that is actually listed? No, all right. So let's just, are you okay to go to a?
I guess as a final comment, I respect everything that everyone said. And again, I'm in favor of this project. I don't have any fear that if we remove it from this document, that it's going to be forgotten.
Any comment, public comment on taking Mona Terrace out of the long-range facilities plan? No? Okay, all in favor? Mr. Lee, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Maxon-Canale, Mr. Peterson, and Mrs. Rinaldi against. Mrs. Mr. Krasnoff, Mrs. Flynn, Mrs. Gurney, and Mrs. Jacobson. Abstain? Did you vote?
Yeah.
Opposed? So motion passes 5-4.
Yes. Chuck.
All right, 5-4. Mr. Peterson, go ahead.
Yeah, my second amendment, I think is less controversial. We can lead the way on this. And it's just a cleanup item. I would like to move that in the Fairfield Public Schools Facilities Plan for 2035 draft. Those should be dated. Or delete the line from page 9 that says, at the completion of large renovation addition project in 2020 for Holland Hill. When we spoke about this on the 11th, Chair suggested that this was language that was requested by the administration. However, I went back to previous drafts and it dates back to 2018. It's just a holdover from those earlier drafts. So I just don't think it's appropriate. I think it's confusing to be in this edition of the document.
Pardon me? Oh, can we just get a second, please, Mr.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Very excited.
Rationales.
That's fine.
Move your
Okay.
motion. Thank you, Mrs. Maxon-Canale. Sorry.
No, that's the rationale is there. I think it's cleaner to have it without.
Okay, I'm just gonna ask Mr. Papa George, this was already inserted language. This is not committee language, as you said. So I'm just gonna ask Mr. Papa George for this. Why this was remaining in your working draft on this item, and if you feel it's a need for some reason that maybe we don't know.
No, I believe it was a holdover from the previous documents.
So you would be fine taking that out.
And I would just add that, in previous instances, we've done additional work on Holland Hill that needed to be done. So I don't think it precludes us doing that work by taking it out. It's a cleaner document without it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Papa George.
Just I was just having a clarifying question. Was that as a result, wasn't there outdoor issues and field issues at Holland Hill, if I'm remembering correctly?
We did work on the field at the request of the Parks and Rec Department.
That's what I was trying to figure out. Thank you. Clarifying to Mr. Peterson. Thank you.
Okay, any public comment on this? All right, all in favor? That passes unanimously, 9-0. All right, Mr. Asa, you were up with your first amendment.
Make the motion on page 7 under long term to strike dedicated CPC space built at upcoming elementary school projects and at Ward and replace with the language I provided.
Can you just read the motion, please?
Okay. Provide 10 full-size classrooms and associated small spaces, specialized spaces and office space, in addition to the existing full-size classrooms at ECC Ward, in order to provide a permanent long-term solution for the program with final location parentheses S, to be determined by the BOE.
Second, oh, sorry, second. Mr. Peterson? Okay, sorry, Mr.
And as I put in here, my rationale, making this document about needs and deficiencies related to the ECC and a long-term permanent space. While we know that the elementary school projects are the most likely, we've talked about Mona Terrace tonight. If that comes on board and we wind up going in there, I'm trying to do this in a way where it does the same thing without tying our hands to any specific location. So I think Mona Terrace is a perfect example. In 2 years, if we decide to put 10 classrooms there until projects are done, so be it. And that's my reasoning for that.
Any comments, Mr. Krasnoff?
We heard the public, or at least the PTA council say that they support the plan that was kind of left in a memo, which was building them on elementary schools. I think we should honor plan and the public, keep it in the document until otherwise determined. As you guys argued for Mona Terrace to remove it, we can easily meet again to remove or change if something does change. But as far as I'm concerned, that is the best plan moving forward, and I would hate to see that come out of the document.
One more thing here is I think it's important, however this passes or fails or is modified, I think it's important for our other town bodies to at least get the number of full-size classrooms and associated spaces in there as a statement. Because I think in other ways and in memos, we've talked about 5 classrooms at 2 schools. I think it's important to state definitively in this document that we know as of now, according to our executive director of special education, that he needs 10 full-size classrooms and all of the associated space with it. So as we go into talks with other town bodies, I think it's good to have that there.
Okay, sorry, oh, well, Mrs. Lynn?
I will not be supporting, and just to speak to that, I harken back to like conversations that were had in 2019, 2018, when a similar approach was taken. And my concern with putting the number of classrooms is it doesn't give us flexibility and does not give the director of special education flexibility that they may need. And in looking at the work of the facilities committee and our administration, they've made a recommendation of where they would like the ECC space to go. We know what the upcoming projects are. And I think that going back to more flexibility without a plan is an adage for delay. And I think at this point, what is before us is movement forward that coordinates a lot of moving pieces. So while I appreciate the intent to give flexibility, I think that's exactly what the document before us does currently.
Mr. Lee?
I think now, after the news we heard today, we don't have a guarantee anymore of Mona Terrace. I'm gonna go in thinking we don't have Mona Terrace because I thought we were gonna have it for 2025. Don't. So I think those 10 classrooms are important, and this now is urgent. If we wait now for Mona Terrace, you're kicking the can down again for another 2 years that we may not have. So we have to start coming with some kind of plan now, because we know the procedure, how long it's gonna take. If I say today, we're gonna get this 10, it's gonna be 4 years before it's actually completed, 3 to 4 years, right? And we still gotta figure out that over crowding at the other schools without a Mona Terrace, which was part of the huge plan and conversation and facilities. So I agree with Mr. Ace as far as the other town boards now need to know, we need 10, right? But we can't depend on the Mona Terrace, so I'm not gonna.
Mr. Krasnoff.
Just to that point, we could easily sit here and try to move the entire plan forward. There's a million things we could do to try to rectify this. I wish this had a little bit more detail to it. If it did, I could definitely get on board and support it. I feel it leaves it too open-ended for interpretation. I really don't want other boards interpreting our work.
Sorry, Mrs. Maxine-Kennelly.
The reason why I'm leaning towards supporting this is because it provides the definitive information that we have been asked in the past by other town boards. You know, you're saying that you want to update ECC space to build it out at places. This is articulating, and hopefully we'll end up standing all behind it. This is articulating the need. The need is for 10 classrooms. That is something that was lacking, for example, although I thought we had a very definitive with ed specs and clear plan and a rationale, and still Mill Hill didn't go through as the Board of Ed asked. If we had gone in there and just asked for space, I mean, what it is my understanding from the chair that a major impetus for this plan moving at the speed that it did in the spring was because you needed it for September. In which case they're going to be looking for greater specificity than dedicated space. And that's what I appreciate about this. Doesn't commit us. It doesn't say that the 10 classrooms won't be in elementary school, but it could be in Mona Terrace. I don't quite, I'm not quite hearing Mr. Testani the way Mr. Lee is. I totally understand the idea of not feeling like you've got something in writing. But I feel like it was a little bit stronger than that. You know, to me, the reason we wouldn't end up moving forward with Mona Terrace is the point Mr. Asa raised, which is if it proves to be far more money than what we thought, which is one thing if it's going to be the long-term permanent solution, it's a completely other thing if it's only planned from the get-go as a temporary solution. I think that's the discussion we're going to end up having. But regardless, we need the 10 classrooms, and I think that degree of specificity in here serves us better.
We can amend what's already in here to add that in if you'd like, but the reason why that wasn't in here is because we started out during redistricting asking for specialized programming. The ask was for 19. Then we put in our charge 15. Then somehow during redistricting, it got up to 16. And then now it's down to 50. So we don't know actually that that's going to be the case because it's changed 3 times in 1 year.
Follow up to through the chair to Mr. Asa. Can you capture for me where you've got the number 10?
Yes, I reached out to Chair, Board of the Facilities Committee and Mr. Testani, CC'd the rest of the committee on there in an email. One of the questions I asked was, from Mr. Mancusi, could we get a definitive answer in a needs assessment response as of today? What are the long-term needs for ECC? And what was relayed from Mr. Mancusi through Mr. Testani was that it was basically 15 classrooms. There's 6 at Ward, 1 in theory if we had 5 at 2 other locations, making 15 and converting a full-size classroom at Ward to other space. So it would be consistent and equal for 3 sites, 5, 5, and 5. And that I specifically asked, is this a long-term fulfillment of our needs, considering how the growth has happened? And that's how I based this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Procedure
I'm not,
question.
I just, oh, sorry, Mr.
So procedure, if that motion passes, we're saying 10 classrooms
At an unidentified location.
at an identified location, but you could potentially split those classrooms 5 here, 3 here.
Or 10 at 1.
Or 10 at
1
one.
at 10.
Right, so if
Yeah.
if we do the waterfall within that charge, it comes back, you can add it to any charge for any building committee to say, can you put X amount of classrooms here? Or how procedurally, how would that, like?
I can speak to the intent of, for example, if it were Dwight and Jennings as has been, proposed by the committee, it would be 5 at each.
Right.
But if we've also talked about, if they weren't all at one school, we've talked about Mona Terrace. So my concern was more about getting the number out there for the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen and the RTM. So we definitively say in writing. So we're, as Mrs. Jacobson said, in the past, we've gone back and forth. This is putting it in writing that it's 10 classrooms outside of Ward. That was my intent. And I put locations because of what I've said. There's no agenda here.
Yeah, I mean, and we can actually add that to the existing language here. That's not a problem. Mr. Krasnoff.
I have a big concern because we even started this year not knowing that we would get an extra CLC or an extra, like, I don't want to hamstring us with a certain amount. Now,
Can I just, I don't mean.
Wait, sorry.
But I'm not, just so the record, my amendment is for ECC only, not the other specialized programs.
so I understand that, but next year he may come back and say, we had overwhelming success with a 4 full-year program. We need an extra classroom. Well, we have 10 in this document. We don't have 11. So what are we gonna bring it back and amend the document? Or are we just gonna do the 10 and now be one short and have to find a home for the one?
Well, right, to your point, we don't have 2 CLCs at Burr and 2 CLCs at Jennings in here and 1 TLC at Riverfield in here, right? We don't have that.
I just feel in the past, I've witnessed shortfalls that weren't intentional. It was just looking at things today and not looking at things long-term. And this is the long-term facilities plan. I don't want to snapshot it today. That's kind of my concern.
Wait, oh, okay, this is what.
Just a point of clarification to the chair, any building project that comes along eventually, whether it be Dwight or Jennings or a mega school, would have an ed spec that we go through that eventually goes to the other town bodies, correct? Okay, so my concern, and where I agree with Mr. Krasnoff, is that we have seen such fluctuation that like I said, this is the first time the ECC is in this document in totality. We have seen tremendous movement, and I just get worried. And I fully appreciate that our other town bodies need to know the scope of a project, but that's not what we're voting on today. And I think that when we're looking at this document as a long-term plan with a lot of moving pieces, to look at it as a way to get on another path that I think frankly some of us do not want to get on. I think hearing that there's delays at Mona Terrace concerns me. Hearing from our population about conditions at Dwight and Jennings concerns me. Hearing about the needs of our ECC concerned me. So I don't have much interest in exploring projects that have not been vetted and recommended by our administration, which the 2 elementary school projects upcoming have been. So I find the memo at the top of this document to be more than fitting enough to articulate to the other town bodies what our intent is.
Okay, so, go ahead.
If you want to respond to that.
No, that's okay, go ahead.
No, I just, I support this amendment. I understand Mr. Ace's rationale to the point that, and I think, again, Ms. Canali said the exact thing. We're going to be asked by other town bodies, what do you need? Because my understanding was what this document was about needs and deficiencies and that we have at our facilities. And in that sense, throughout this document, for all of the elementary schools, North Stratfield provide 1.5 gym space / stage. The document is full of very specific recommendations.
Classrooms though.
It's very specific in this document what our needs are so that we can communicate to other town bodies
I
what.
have no problem adding that. To what the existing language. So here's what I'm gonna say. So far we've taken out Mona Terrace out. This takes out any location whatsoever. TBD by the BOE. So what you're actually left here then with is Ward, Stratfield, and Holland Hill. That's what you're left with this amendment. And what I'm gonna say is a very similar amendment was made 5 years ago tonight. Not put the ECC in Stratfield and Holland Hill because this document was gonna get updated. And we were gonna keep it at Stratfield instead. Well, that happened and we figured out TBD. 5 years ago tonight, June 25th, 2019. This motion to me, Mr. Asa, is very similar to 5 years ago tonight. TBD. So I'm like to keep this on because what we are left with is Stratfield, Holland Hill, and ward at this point. Not with any type of message, to your point, to the town boards of where might that be? What are you thinking? What is the direction? So after this vote, I can make an amendment to put 10 classrooms on here if that makes you feel better in terms of expressing what the need is, because it's not 10 classrooms. We know that it's more. But for me, I'm not going to support this amendment because we took this vote 5 years ago already. And I don't want to take the same vote again. So that's just my personal feeling on this, and would like to move us forward with setting a direction on for the ECC that doesn't include the words to be determined. Mr. Peterson.
I just want to add, just for context, I think it's important to say this. Things happened not long after June 25th, 2019.
5 years.
And, you know, and
Stevenson, you're interrupting.
Yeah, sorry, you're right. Sorry, Mrs. Max Kelly, you're right. Go ahead.
things happened, and, you know, the current chair at the time made decisions about what was going to be on the agenda. It's not as though we were discussing it at every meeting. I think that's just an important, if things got left off or delayed, it was not the responsibility of any individual board member, but the direction of the board at the time was somewhat distracted. It's never something that came off of our internal radar.
So now, right. Right, so it's been brought back 5 years later.
All I'm saying is that barring another global pandemic, I hope to continue talking about this at upcoming meetings.
So I just want to repeat, the pandemic hit 8 months later. 8 months. There's been 14 meetings in 4 months. But I appreciate your perspective. Things shift. All I'm saying is end result. End result is still the same. Okay. Is there anyone else, or I will open it up? Mrs. Rinaldi.
I think too, it's very polarizing, honestly, and I want to say that I personally want to move forward with the long-term facilities plan, but I see this as being part of it as well. And I don't know, I see a lot of polarization amongst us based on, I see these things as working together. So
Sorry, I don't understand what you mean by this. What do you mean?
I see this amendment and the long-term facilities plan as working together. I'm not the most articulate person. I've said that from the beginning. I don't want to be brought down because of that. I feel like it's very polarizing, and I think if, sometimes if that's not your viewpoint or you don't agree, a lot of times you don't let people speak on it. I just want to say that.
What?
Speak their feelings or how they're voting a certain way.
Is there any public comment on this amendment?
Lauren Efren, 241 Burr Street, Dwight, co-president. I think what the agenda, it seems, is to try to neuter this plan, to try to take out the things that make it important to push forward. That's what's on the docket tonight. Action, not inaction, not splitting hairs. And I know that it's hard, it's a lot to take in. We all want to make sure that everything is done correctly and by the book. With all due respect, the last time that this was up, it was a different time, it was a different chair. We have a chair now who is asking quite clearly to move forward with a plan that has been thoughtfully considered by our facilities committee. And all of the items are important. But to narrow it down, say that there is no, that there are only 3 static facilities that the ECC can go into currently, right? That may mean that in 8 months or in 5 years, it will come up again. If you leave it the way it is now, it makes it clear that there is a possibility to go to any of the schools in our district, not just 3. Thank you.
Just wanted to take a second here to speak to
Sorry,
Greg Bosch, 470 Jack from Stratfield. Just wanted to take a minute here to speak to what I think that this short 1 sentence in the long-term facility plan means and its importance. We all know the 504, 441 Mill Hill debate. Well, the school was built too small. But when the decision was made to then add 2 CLCs to that school, the K-5 population got even smaller. And so there's only 399 seats there, arguably, for the gen ed population. When we tell other town bodies that we want to dedicate ECC space and add it to an upcoming elementary school project in a ward, we're saying it's important for the ECC to be attached to an elementary school. And we know this because then those students, as they become kindergartners, stay in the building and remain part of that community, at least in best case scenarios. So to me, the importance of this language is that we want to add it to an elementary school project, and there's also state reimbursement money there as well when that comes up. So I would hope that this body would be able to kind of keep this language here, but maybe also add the 10 classroom specifics as a compromise. My urging would be to amend or withdraw this amendment and try to state it in a different way. Thanks so much.
Okay, sorry. Oh, sorry.
Hi, Sean Hood, 420 Alley. And from my seat and my perspective, I would love to have more information included in this type of agenda that includes the actual direct needs, the number of classrooms. Yes, these documents are flexible, but how often it's based on the work tonight, it's quite laborious, intensive space for you guys to be constantly working on this. So it's my opinion to keep that transparency in the document, keep the need for how many ECC classes we want, so that people who are new moving here, looking at information, can actually have an idea of actually there's a huge need for single ECC classrooms in this space.
Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna make an amendment to your amendment, but go ahead.
I was just gonna ask if you wanted to do a straw poll and whether there was more, if I wanted to draw it or something.
Oh, no. I mean, you don't have to withdraw it. I mean, I'm gonna make an amendment to your amendment, if that's okay. So I'm gonna make an amendment to Mr. Asa's amendment. And that's to leave under the long term, the dedicated ECCs built at upcoming elementary schools projects and at ward. And then to add on under sub bullet point, that provide 10 full-size classrooms and associated small spaces, specialized spaces, and office space, in addition to existing full-size classrooms at ECC ward. Can I get a second? Mr. Krasnoff is my second. So I hear what everyone is saying. This was left out of committee like this in order to provide greater flexibility as we move forward with CCC needs. I hear what everyone is interested in is in conveying the needs of the classrooms under this long-term provision. So we can do that. I'll amend just by amending his motion to add that under the existing language that's in this draft.
Second yet?
Yes, Mr. Krasnoff.
Thank you. I missed that.
Okay. So that is my amendment to the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment to the amendment? Well, I mean, I'm amending your amendment, but yeah, I mean,
I think this is getting at my point. I mean, my point was to get the need at this time of the 10 classrooms. And to Mr. Krasnoff's point, though, I have no problem updating this document if needs increase. As I stated, I think that the number of classrooms needs to be in there because that's what we were given today. And you mentioned a snapshot. And I think it's important because it's been said that we need to finish this document now because we're going to be going before the Board of Finance at the capital planning workshop this fall. I'm not sure if this was the cleanest way of doing it, but I'm assuming what your amendment is to basically strike my language and then reword my language as a bullet.
yes, into the existing language. Just from the provide 10 full-size classrooms and associated small spaces, specialized spaces, just off of your amendment. And office space in addition to existing full-size classrooms at ECC ward, period.
And just to clarify, when I say all those other spaces, I'm not listing them as deficiencies
Speech,
because
psych, social work.
my thought process was that when we do the inspects, we will give all of that information and that we will defend that at that time. Because as we know, things change, but we know there will be associated spaces with those. So that is the reasoning why I only use the full-size classroom with the assumption that everything else that goes along with it will be put forward.
Like a 1.0 OTPT room, et cetera, speech, psych, social worker.
If anything changes by the time we get to that.
But it could. Thank you. Mr. Krasnoff.
I just want to respond through the chair to Mr. Asa. I appreciate that sentiment. I'm okay with it being a snapshot. If that's the direction we want this document to be, and we will be revisiting it, I think a snapshot's there. I will be supporting the amendment to the amendment.
The amendment to the motion.
The amendment to the motions.
Okay. Any public comment on the amendment to the motion and the amendment only? So just to keep this language as it is, but to add Mr. Asa's language about the deficiencies. No? Okay. All in favor? Back to the, that we are only voting on my amendment. So all in favor? Mrs. Rinaldi, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Jacobson, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Flynn, Mr. Lee, and Mr. Krasnoff in favor, against, Mrs. Maxey Kennelly. Motion passes 8-1. Now we are back to
the original. Yeah. So now just Nixon.
any further discussion on the motion as amended? Are you confused?
So does he withdraw the amendment?
I amended it. Now it just stands as it will read in the document.
Got it.
So it will say dedicated ECC space about the upcoming elementary school projects and at word, sub bullet point, provide 10 classrooms, et cetera. So that's what we're voting on now. So Mr. Asa's motion as amended. All in favor? Oh, sorry.
Wait. I just wanted to say, relative to Mr. Asa's point about not including specialized, I just want to say that in our planning principles, number 3 in this document says we should provide wherever possible the specialized spaces needed to support full-size classrooms. So I just want to say that it's implied in this document that those are things that we need.
All right, and in the other ECC spaces, you see conference room, speech, psychologist, social worker, OT, PT, gym space.
All I'm saying is the fact that we don't list them in his motion doesn't mean that we don't want them. And we say that in the document.
Or need them. Right, more appropriately. Okay, any public comment on the main motion as amended? All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Asa.
I am going to ask for board consent to waive all of the lines here because they were posted online per Robert's rules ahead of time and they were distributed ahead of time. So I will make the motion, but I will ask to waive the entire reading. Motion
So
to-
is there any objection to waiving of the reading?
Motion to make the following amendments to the language referenced by page number as presented and posted.
Okay, before I open this up,
Second.
oh, sorry, second, Mr. Peterson seconds. Thank you. Just before I open up to discussion, Mr. Asa, I just had a few points of clarification, just so I think that the elevator, your appendix are clear. Roofs are going to B, boilers are going to C, and elevators are going to D. So that part I was clear on.
Hope I captured it right.
Yeah. So I just have a few clarifications on some of the other things that were not appendix related before we discuss them, so we all know what we're talking about. On page 8.
Can we hear the rationale? I just, if the public hasn't read all of this, we haven't heard.
Wanted me to make the motion first. I was trying to follow the rules. So as I said to the, in my email to the facilities committee and to Mr. Testani, my thrust behind this was not to change anything. I have no intent on changing anything in the document, the way it's structured or worded deficiencies or anything. What I'm trying to capture here is the spirit of what we've talked about, is that this document is a statement of needs and deficiencies, lacking dates and dollars. I appreciate the committee's appendices that they added, and what I like about the appendices, for example, it says roof installation year and projected replacement year. As we know that a lot of these projects don't happen on the projected year, but hopefully very close to that. We've had instances of that recently. So the fact that the appendices say projected year replacement, I think is good. And a lot of that, as Mrs. Jacobson said, is based on warranties, expected life, usage, et cetera. So all of the references to the appendices are simply removing the dates from the main part of the document for consistency of it being without dates or dollars because they're on the waterfall or in the appendices. On the seed money, I've simply just said, refer to the waterfall. We have Dwight, Jennings, and Osborne Hill on the waterfall. And I discussed with the chair that in the September meetings, we plan to discuss moving forward with Dwight and the seed money, and I believe ed specs and whatnot to go before the town bodies. So this is simply moving words out or dates out and putting them where I believe and I understood where they live, because we've been told that the dates and the dollars live on the waterfall. But I'm okay with the appendices for those items because of what I've said. So that was my rationale behind this, and it's more for consistency and structure. Again, no way is this saying a project isn't moving forward or moving on the waterfall. I have no intent to move anything on the waterfall at this point.
Mrs. Flynn. Thank you for the amendment. I appreciate the appendixes. I actually think the appendix additions is a great addition to the document. I do have concerns about the second and third bullet point and removing, and the 1, 2, 3, 4. Also the strike for Sherman, which is also another later one that kind of got, I think, a little bit lost there. But I think that in the same vein as the last amendment, I think it's really important for our other town bodies to see our waterfall in the context of our plan and our thinking. So that's my thought process behind that. And I think it's important for our community to see, from my recollection, the waterfall isn't voted on. And I think it's important to see that commitment, especially when we know we're going to be coming back in the fall, making those.
To not strike that.
Do we need a second? Okay. And then just lastly, and this is just a little bit of a point of, maybe this is a question through the chair towards the facilities committee, but the removal of page 19 and page 20 of the turf upgrades and replacement, those don't go to an appendix. And I have some concerns sending those kind of to live floating alone in the waterfall. We've had a lot of movement in the waterfall, and obviously our athletic fields, if we look, this is kind of a separate issue, but I'm going to take the time to talk about it in public. I think we're definitively below where we need to be in terms of our fields. We're hearing from our athletic directors that there is a demand for fields. And I think that having them in the document with a target, I think is a really good sign of our support for them. So for those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 reasons, I can't support kind of this omnibus approach, but I fully appreciate the intent for the amendment.
I just want to do a follow-up on the turf field. Mr. Tassani, you had stated in committee that you were not in favor of removing those from the turf field. So can you just speak to that piece while we're here?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just felt that with the turf fields, with the amount of use that they get, possible liability if they are expired in terms of life of use, that there could be some exposure to the board, and that we need to stick to a timeline to make sure that they're replaced at the right time. Unlike a boiler that can get longer life expectancy, as we know, or less, as we found out tonight with HVAC units, These are children playing on fields, and I want to make sure that there's definitive replacement when end of life has been reached. That was my rationale in that.
Sorry, Mr. Yes.
So so what I had proposed was to refer to the waterfall. You're saying you want the date in the facility plan definitively.
Somewhere, yes, and it's just so that we don't lose sight of, or some other board or some other administration move those projects, because those waterfall projects get moved up or back. That was my only thinking. If you move a boiler by a year or two and it doesn't break, not a big deal. God forbid somebody gets hurt and they see that it was supposed to be replaced and it wasn't. Litigious society we live in, I think that could open some exposure.
But both dates are the same, so I don't know. This is, are both fields at the same useful life and age? Mrs. Jacobs?
No, Ludlow was installed a year earlier.
And I believe in the waterfall, they're not the same year. I thought one was one after the other.
Nope,
I believe it got moved.
even though Ludlow would be a year older. Mrs. Guernsey?
No, I was just going to add, I really appreciate all the work that went into this, and I understand what Mr. Issa is doing here. But for me, I'm just thinking of it just purely practical, like purposes. Functionally, I want to see the dates in the document. I think it's helpful for me personally, and I can imagine it would be helpful for others. So that's, I understand where Mr. Issa is coming from, but I'd like to keep it.
Mr. Issa, can I ask you a clarifying language? Can I ask you a clarifying question on your amendment? So page 8, where you said strike existing wording, thank you. In your description, you explained, I was confused what that meant from the pre-existing wording or the actual draft wording. So you clarified for that, it is the seed funding. And replace with C waterfall. So what waterfall? Like the waterfall that we last presented with, the waterfall we did, like what waterfall are you referencing here? The waterfall
The one
changes
that
on
we're-
like a monthly basis.
The one that we're gonna talk about in September and go to the Board of.
So a future waterfall.
The waterfall's the waterfall, whatever it is at that point, I guess.
Okay.
But the one that we'll be discussing and going to the boards for our next project, which currently is Dwight.
So just for me, I don't have that in front of me, so I don't actually know what I'm voting on with this amendment. It's almost, to me, it'd be like a flying blind, and as Mr. Testani just stated, things on the waterfall. So, because I could say sea waterfall, well, this money for Dwight was supposed to be sea waterfall 2014, right? Sea waterfall. And we're 10 years later. So sea waterfall doesn't necessarily help me with making that decision. So I also just want to inform everyone that these dates came to us preloaded in terms of it wasn't something that the committee had inserted on these or made up. We had been working with Mr. Papa George and administration off, as you know, Mr. Papa George is constantly updating this book and there's many dates. So we didn't insert that. We just actually, it was bigger. It included the whole project. It was 2025 to 2031. And we were just like, well, let's just focus on what we know is coming up. So all those decisions were made to actually pare this down a little bit. So for the things that say sea waterfall, so that would be the Dwight seed funding. Obviously now, well, Osborne already passed, so I don't know how that would work, but the Jennings seed funding.
At Osborne Hill, my proposal is to say sea waterfall, but it would be, in theory, this would be changing what we are sort of this.
What was page 13, Mr. Sea Waterfall? Oh, that was Osborne Hill.
Yep.
Okay.
And then the 2 turf fields were the seawater.
Okay, so for those items, the waterfall and for Ludlow and Ward, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's just my issue with it is I don't know what I'm actually voting on because I don't have that waterfall in front of me. So I feel a little like I'm flying blind on that. And I appreciate what you're saying about the dates. So this draft is 67 pages. The clean reads like 35. So what we did take out is exactly what was stated was all those years with the dollars, right? The actual waterfall things with the dollars. So I want to be clear. No one's making a motion to take out like the year a building was built or a year it got renovated, right? I mean, no one's taking out those years. The top of this document and those sections for each school is meant to signify and to inform when was it built, when was it renovated, what's the current project happening or on deck there. These are informational communication tools around our long-range facilities plan, but we are taking out all of those dates and dollars that are all struck through later in the document. The last point of clarification, I just wanted to ask for Sherman. I was a little confused. Just want to make sure I'm understanding what this is. It was, where is that? Where's Sherman?
14.
Page 14. Okay, so status for Sherman. You struck the status, which is all of the phases that Sherman has had, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3.
Yes, can I answer that?
Wait, I just want to ask my clarifying question first. I could have understood if maybe it was moving up to renovated, but I wouldn't want to strike that, have all of the projects for other schools.
Well, no, under status for Riverfield, it says NP above. It's not talking about that it was renovated and added on in 2015.
I understand it.
So that was my reason.
Yeah, you were.
It was simply for consistency. It's not, all that's done. There's nothing proposed here. It was just for consistency because throughout the document, it seemed in many schools that don't currently have something upcoming that it said NP. So that was all it was.
And to me, it made more sense if you had motioned to put it under the renovation dates rather than status dates. So if you put nothing planned or nothing in reference to that, you didn't make any changes to the project for Sherman later in the document?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't. I see what you're saying. I did not. That was, I guess that's probably where it should have been originally.
Oh, I think it was under the
Yeah,
renovation.
so that's when this document came to us, it probably should have been under renovation. and
Under
addition.
renovated,
Yeah.
right, okay.
I didn't,
Understood.
there was no malintent. I didn't.
Totally, just wanted to clarify what you were asking.
And I think that's what Mrs. Flynn was, I don't know if that was your concern too. You had a
Yeah.
concern about.
Yeah, sure. It's just that it's kind of getting lost. Like I said, I fully appreciate.
So really
Both
what
getting
my
Muddled a little bit.
amendment should have said was replace with NP and move existing language under renovation and addition.
Can I ask a clarifying question through the chair to Mr. Asa? Would you be amenable to just adding the waterfall to this document at the end as an include, like, instead of all, I'm just asking.
The current waterfall? Like.
I mean, I thought about an appendix.
Yeah, add it as an.
I thought about an
And
appendix.
leave
for
the language as
of the
exists,
project.
leave the language as existing and just make sure.
Waterfall.
I'm just curious.
It's a living document, and
No.
like I said.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't
Yeah.
put the
You wouldn't
waterfall.
want to put it
No,
here and vote
I would be amenable to it being in an appendix, like the rest of the suggestion.
and leaving the language as
The
it.
appendix needs to be changed.
No, leaving the language that I proposed,
Oh.
but instead of see waterfall, see appendix, I guess. I mean,
Oh,
I suppose, I don't know.
I was trying to kind of split the hairs.
I'm yeah, go ahead. Surprised enough.
I appreciate all the work that went into this. I understand your thought process. And honestly, I could have gotten behind some of this if the sea waterfall pieces weren't in there. And if the status on Fairfield Woods Middle School, you say add 2023 began. I felt that kind of contradicted you wanting to remove dates. So some dates were okay to be in there, other dates were not okay to be in there. But as we discussed in your prior amendment, and we all were amendable to, this is a snapshot in time. And as you said, 10 classrooms is the snapshot we're looking at. Well, the snapshot we're looking at is the seed money in those specific days on the waterfall currently. So if you want to be consistent, we should be putting the dates that currently fall in the waterfall, just like you say, sea waterfall. There's no reason to reference sea waterfall. It should be in the document.
Right, Mrs. Maxon Kelly.
The exact reason not to is because we already have the front of the draft. You see how much this thing can already get updated. The waterfall is, as Mrs. Jacobson said, it's live. And that's honestly what we planned from.
that is what we show we especially show and share with the other town bodies. They appreciate it so much that they've tried to emulate it with town projects. It's a very powerful document to the other town boards. And so that in seeing the money and the dates there, I don't want to have it in two places, because if something happens and we start shifting, we shift it live there. Where, you know, for any of these projects, we still have projects in here, we have needs identified which don't have dates attached to them. And I just think, I agree with the amendment of stripping these out. That does not take away from our commitment to these projects. But I would not even be interested in having the waterfall attached to this. Because it changes, and I would like to think this does not change without it coming before the board. That's what should be happening. Whereas the waterfall changes and it can be brought to us. And that's what drives our discussion.
I respond to that.
Well, let me just follow up. I just want to say that it has been changed multiple times without us voting on it. So
The facilities plan.
it changed multiple times.
The water.
With,
The facilities.
Facilities.
The last time this was voted on was 2015.
every time it's been updated, it's been brought before us.
Yeah, but we didn't vote, it was a vote on.
Whereas the waterfall changes as different numbers come in. I mean, that's the idea of all of those blue links, that it not only can change, it also tracks those changes.
I think the elephant in the room is that I think there's some feeling of like, that we don't want that to change. That we want these states for these schools, for Osborne, Dwight, and Jennings, to be known as they have been known for over a decade, and that they are a decade late. And that the waterfall, that's fluid, is not something that we want to be fluid, because those three schools need to get their renovations. So that's probably the sentiment of, at least for my own self. I don't want it to actually, and we don't even approve that, right? So that is gonna go to other town boards. That's a whole different approval process. There's no voting on that tonight. There's ed specs, then it goes to all the other town boards. So, but at the end of the day, I think that the town boards also need direction from this board and a message to our community of what our hopes and aspirations and expectations are for all of our schools. And that is why, it's not why the years are in here, because they already were, but why I'm in favor of being very clear on keeping them in here, because we didn't flip the dates in here, just keeping them.
But Mrs. Jacobson, as a follow-up to that, you were, for example, asked at the last meeting by Mr. Asa to be in contact with the Board of Finance Chair. Did you reach out to her?
Spoke with her, yes.
Did you reach out to her?
She texted me, I called her.
And did she communicate urgency to you for this document to be completed in this manner by their September meeting, that was our one shot at communicating these needs?
Oh, no, she didn't say that at all. She said that the waterfall doesn't have to be buttoned up for the capital planning workshop, that it can be later. This, as you said earlier, this doesn't go to the Board of Finance. It never has gone to the Board of Finance. Fully appreciate that all the other town boards are going to want to see what our plans are, as they have for a very long time. But yeah.
Wait, I'm unclear. I thought you said multiple times.
No,
that
this.
the urgency behind this was that it had to be ready for September for that capital planning workshop.
Updating this with all the deficiencies, meeting with all the principals, making sure what we were needed, would then inform the waterfall and cash flow. That is what goes before.
It's not quite what you said, but okay, I understand the revision.
Well, no, this needs to be updated in order, because there are things coming off the waterfall that have been cut from this. That changes the waterfall. So, Mr. Lee.
I understand where this amendment's coming. My biggest fear, and we've seen it, I am for something needs to be done in Dwight. I've been very vocal about that. I've been vocal about, since the beginning. I think it's on the waterfall. We've seen what happens, things on the waterfall, they disappear and they get pushed off. We can't control that. What I want to keep is those 2 schools on here, 3 schools on here, to remind people it's not going away. You're pushing it off. Our job is to inform the town what the deficiencies are in this town for our kids in these school systems, right? And I'm all for an ECC everywhere else, and we discussed that tonight, if it wants to go here, here, but I think the bottom line is we need to focus on what's happening at Dwight right now, and they need some kind of attention, whether it's a rebuild or a renovation. And I think it's on the waterfall now. We go in with what we've done tonight, we get that seed money, the first thing we say in that seed money is, what's the best option? And by the way, can we add an ECC here? And I think we keep that going in your long-term facility plan, it's not going away. They have every right to say, no, it's not gonna happen. We can't control that, but our job is to make sure our kids in this community have the right classrooms, the right learning environment for them, and that's our responsibility.
This is fun. Just, and like I said, I fully appreciate the intent, but I'm looking at, I'm just pulled up Dwight. And for status, it says, 2025 seed funding. It doesn't have any dollars attached to it. That lives inside the waterfall. So for me, I had the opportunity to attend the capital planning meeting last fall at the fire station, I believe. And I have a very different recollection, and it wasn't one member, but it seemed pretty emphatic. And I'm gonna go back and watch the recording just to remind myself that they wanted a plan. That they wanted a plan from us. They wanted an assessment of needs from us, and they want Dwight, I remember being specified. What was the plan? Where is ECC? So I think it does us a tremendous disservice to spend all this time and energy, to Mr. Ace's well-taken point, that we need to articulate our needs and to leave off the intent of the seed funding. Fully appreciate there's no dollars attached to it. That lives inside the waterfall, but it says here that our intent is that those 2 elementary projects are seed funded, and that is where we are going. So like I said, I can't support this amendment with page 8, page 10, and the 2 fields on page 19 and 20.
Mr. Krasnoff.
In terms of the waterfall, and to Ms. Max Canelli, you said that it's on the waterfall, and refer to the waterfall. And we've seen over the past 2 years, Dwight, for example, live on the waterfall in 3 different locations. 2030, 2028, 2027. It's very easy for it to all of a sudden be 2040. If it's not in this document, we're not committing to it. So to me, at this table, anyone that votes to remove any of that stuff is not only going against possibly doing that project in the fall, everything the public just said tonight.
All right, Mrs. Max Canelli.
Okay, 2 points to follow up on. Number one, through the chair to Mr. Krasnoff, please don't be provocative in that manner. I have to ask that.
Okay, Mr. Krasnoff, Mrs.
I have the floor right now. That means it's not your turn to talk. That's right. This is not going against the will of the public. This is asking to be consistent in a manner that we have in the past. And to Mr. Lee, it is absolutely untrue that the waterfall dictates the actions of the board. In fact, I don't remember what it was, about 7 or 8 years ago, staff swapped Mill Hill and Holland Hill for a variety of reasons I won't get into. The board said, no, put them back. The will of the board went out. We have a chair who has already explicitly expressed her intent. If something got changed on that waterfall, the chair makes the agenda. The chair puts on the agenda a first read of a motion for seed money. It wouldn't matter in that case what was on the waterfall. The waterfall indicates a plan. And if that's what we were looking to do, and if that's what we move forward with that dollar amount, and there's any kind of imbalance, then we charge staff with rebalancing it because we're supposed to spend allocated a certain amount of money. But I just want to be very clear. The waterfall does not dictate our actions. We dictate the waterfall, and any priority that comes up, we would make that change. It does not force our hand. Staff wants to try to put it off to 2040, not that anyone is suggesting that. We say no. That's exactly what we did with Holland Hill and Mill Hill.
Point of order though, wasn't it Mill Hill and then Holland Hill and then Holland Hill jumped to Mill Hill?
No, it was the other way around. It had always been Holland Hill ahead of Mill Hill. Staff reversed them for a variety of reasons, the board put it back. So it had been always Holland Hill first. Then staff swapped it.
Thank you.
Clarifying question. You referenced an allocation about a certain amount of, I'm assuming you're referring to capital that we're supposed to stay within. I was under the assumption, is that still a directive?
No information on that.
I would just want to have that clarified because I don't have a recollection of any kind of allocation outside of the prior administration. So I would want to clarify before we were working under an assumption that we're working within an allocation still,
And just to
clarify.
try to answer it, no, I think that's a very good, point to, let's, new board of selectmen, new board of finance, to clarify what their expectations are, but to be ridiculous about it, what we know we could never do is in 2025, plan for Dwight, Jennings, Osborne Hill seed money simultaneously. So that idea of balance, no, I don't know a specific number to speak to, but we have, and unless the chair can tell me I'm wrong, there's still an unspoken expectation of balance and recognizing that we are but one silo of money that has to be budgeted and bonded.
Yeah, just two things. One to through the chair to Mr. Krasnoff. I just want to make it clear and hopefully have you acknowledge that in no way in me presenting this motion, do you think that I don't support projects or have advocated for closing a school? I mean, you've come to meetings, you've been there, you've seen me ask SLAM as one of the scenarios to determine if it was feasible, because I'm asking the hard questions I know will be asked. And that's what I asked in the June 11th meeting. I didn't sit here and say, I want to make a mega school or close a school. But what I did say was that we're going to be asked the hard questions. And I just wanted to know if we could get any insight onto what those questions may be. But I just want to clarify, because you just made a statement that anybody that supports this amendment is, so if I could give you a second to respond.
I don't disagree with you. You never point blank said to close Dwight, and I have been facility meetings. You have been a proponent of Dwight in the past. My feeling is if everyone at this table is in support of Dwight in 2025, we're not talking 30 years from now. We're talking next year we start planning. Put it in the document. If you don't put it in the document, you're not committing to wanting to do it in the fall. That's my opinion. And for consistency purposes, like you said, if Dwight's gonna go in, Jennings should also be going in, and Osborne Hill should be going in. Everything else on here, like, I don't love the turf fields because I know Mr. Testani wanted to keep it in. There was some of the other stuff that, whether you move it to the appendix, we're okay with that, at least as far as I was concerned in the facilities committee. We understood things are flexible and need to go to appendix. When it comes to building projects, especially one that we're literally starting possibly in 3 months the process, you to not be willing to put that date in this book tells me you're not committed to doing that. I'm just being honest.
I disagree with that sentiment. And I'm actually the one that brought up the fact that it was missing from
Osborne Hill.
Yeah.
So I just, I mean, you're entitled to your opinion, and in no way does this indicate, and I guess my question, because the response from the chair of the facilities committee was my suggestions on the appendices didn't garner any issue from the committee. So I guess the question would be, do you have an issue with the whole document or just the seed funding?
Just the seed funding, because the appendixes are to be updated as we do projects. The seed funding in the fall is planned. If you want the seed funding, put it in. If you want not to have the seed funding in the fall, or you don't support the seed funding in the fall, vote to not put it in. I'm laying it at your feet. If you want to tell the public you don't support it, don't put it in.
Okay.
Want to tell the public you do? Put it in.
All right, thank you, Mr. Krasnoff. Mr. Lee.
Clarification though, and I hear what Mr. Kraus is saying and Mr. Asa, let's just clear something up. If that's in this document that we're trying to vote for tonight, that's not, and I heard it tonight, there's no guarantees we're gonna get the seed money in September. But what it shows is it was planned on this date. That's basically it, right? It's not saying we don't support the project, because at the end of the day, if it's on the waterfall, it's out of our hands, right? So if it's in here or not, that's totally out of our hands.
Okay, I'm gonna go to, unless anyone has anything else, I'm gonna go to public comment on Mr. Asa's, amendment list. Anyone have public comment on this list?
Public comment. For reference, First Street, to Mr. Ace's point, the other town boards want clarification, right? You brought that up in your first. This seems contradictory to me. Either you want more detail or you don't. This amendment makes less clear and more vague. And the other town bodies who are looking for the clarification, to your point, want it. Why would we take it out? Mr. Max, this is right, maximum value. The other town boards are looking for direction. A waterfall or the facilities long range budget. Which one are they looking to? Are they looking to the waterfall or are they looking to the plan? They're looking to the plan, which, as you said, will dictate what happens to the waterfall. So if we present them with a plan that says, look to the waterfall, we're going back and forth. They're looking for a plan. That's it. That's all they're looking for currently. Then the waterfall can be amended according to whatever they come back to you guys with, what they're able to do, right? That's my understanding. And to this comment, I agree. It is something that it would be nice if we could come together and try to find a way to move this plan forward as it. I worry that if we delay this anymore, we're looking at another 10 years of a dilapidated building, not just ours. And all the other facilities that direly need addressed now. Not 10 years from now. Please move forward, please. Look for action, not inaction. Thank you.
Anyone else on the amendment? Okay. So back to Mr. Asa's motion. The list of amendments, all in favor? Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Asa, all opposed? Mrs. Rinaldi, Mrs. Jacobson, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Flynn, Mr. Lee, and Mr. Krasnoff. Motion fails 6-3. We are back to the main motion as amended. So just to review quickly, there's 4 changes. We've added Osborne Hill seed money. We've taken out Mona Terrace for Mr. Peterson. We have taken out the language on Holland Hill, Mr. Peterson's, and we have added detail to the long-term plan for the ECC. Those are the 4 changes in this document. All right, back to the main motion as amended. Is there any public comment on the main motion as amended, which is adoption of this plan with the 4 changes like this? All right, if not, I'll take it back to the board. All in favor?
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to be very clear. I'm voting against the plan. Because this plan and the entire plan, and I want to appreciate the fact finding of this plan. I enormously appreciate. The fact finding of this plan, I enormously appreciate. The work you did meeting with all our administrators was what I thought the charge was to the facilities committee. And that's what this should be, is that listing of facility needs. But to take upon, I think if the amendment had passed, I would have supported it because I think that was true to what the facilities committee was charged with doing. And to not leave this in the process of the waterfall, to not leave this in the process of items getting put on our agenda was not the intention of this document as I've ever understood it. And I want to repeat, this is not to be unappreciative of the work facilities did. But I also want to be clear, and which is an approach I've tried to model as the chair of policy. It doesn't matter how much work was done in facilities if we don't then have a full discussion here, which we have not had, and which we need to have any credibility before other town boards. So somehow we're going to have to cram that all in September. And there is no question that something needs to be done for Dwight. The last meeting, I thought the parents who spoke of the condition of the building were so compelling. I'm not questioning that. But there's an awful lot to this discussion we haven't had. And I too, I've never had, we know we can't close Dwight. We know that we have to create spaces. That's what we know. And there is a whole aspect of this plan that there's a reason redistricting was not put into a subcommittee. Redistricting had to be, and we agreed unanimously on that. Every time it's come up, the one time we tried to not do it this way, it was a bust. That redistricting had to be a discussion of the board as a whole. It couldn't be put into into a subcommittee because everything that subcommittee did would have been questioned and rehashed. We had to do it as a full board. And I have been uncomfortable with this from the jump, dating back to the memo we received in May, that there was work done frequently only by 2 board members. As I understand, one person had difficulty due to work, not always being able to commit to the time of that committee. And I'm not putting fault. But to have the work of 2 people directing this, and we've had no full board discussion. And please don't tell me about 2018. It's a different world. We have different needs. There was a time when the thought of we didn't have the space needs that we have now. And I think there is a level of analysis that this board has never been privy to, that no argument has been put forward for. And if I would have been comfortable with this plan, even without the amendment, if we acknowledge that it's the waterfall that drives everything. If you're telling me it's this document and we haven't had that discussion here, then, and again, I completely know that I will be on the losing end of that vote. But it's a message I feel needs to be said.
Can I respond? Thank you, Mrs. Maxicanelli. So just going back to the beginning of your conversation, the facilities committee wasn't charged by this board to do that. I brought this to the previous facilities committee chair in order to get this plan updated. That was 9 years old. Get this updated and then have that discussion about the waterfall in the summer, the fall. I'm more than happy to have summer meetings if people feel like it's rushed to have more waterfall conversations. I'm more to do that. So we weren't charged. I brought this up in leadership to be done because like 5 years ago, it was supposed to be done then. I don't know what you mean by not having the discussion. So this is the 4th time it's been before the board. Committee purpose is in our bylaws. We are to vet these things. We are to come forward just like any of the other committees and to bring that to the board for consideration. That is all that we did. What is in our bylaws. So I don't know what the concern was on how that played out because that's how our committees work. And it wasn't, and I just would say, Mr. Lee contributed greatly to this plan and input and lended a lot of expertise on facilities. It was incredibly helpful to this process. So a few meetings that he was unable to attend, I assure you that he lended his voice to all aspects of this. So, and I don't mean to speak for you, but I just wanted to get that out for the record. So just wanted to say those few comments. Thank you. Mr. Krasnoff.
Well, I was gonna echo that Mr. Lee did contribute quite a bit even when he missed. He reviewed every minutes, made sure if he didn't understand something, he asked questions at the next meeting. In addition, so the public knows, Superintendent Testani sat in most of these meetings and were part of the conversation. So was Mr. Papa George. Mr. Mancusi was also at many meetings. He had almost every single building principal as part of this process. We're talking 10 meetings over about a 4-month span. This wasn't 2 people sitting in a back room, like it was alluded to, just deciding to come up with this massive. it was a well thought out, well document, lots of input. And quite frankly, Ms. Max, I take offense of you making it sound like two of us did that. Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna go back to thank you everyone for the comments. I understand there's a lot of issues. Yes.
I just want to say, and for the public and people watching it, oftentimes many of us put forth amendments and we put, things fail. It should be understood that that is the work of the board. And it's our job to ask questions and to push things forward. And just because, something that you want doesn't happen, ultimately, at the end of the day, the will of the board prevails, and that's what we're going to do. And as Ms. Maxon Kennelly said, I understand a lot of her points. And this plan is clearly going to pass. But I just want to be clear that it's important that this board still has these tough discussions. And as we get to, move on through the years and, going through these, that we continue to push and ask hard questions. And sometimes they're uncomfortable, but they have to be asked. But, moving forward, I agree is important.
I'm just gonna sum up my position on this, besides the technical components of this. We went through a tough year in 22-23 with this community. We had 11 different scenarios, closing people's schools, repurposing people's schools. Never mind the 2020 scenarios, 2017 scenarios, 2016 scenarios, 29 scenarios. I get that this is a technical component job of us to do to update these. For me, this is about our community and finally getting to a place where we are clear in the direction after many 29 different scenarios and 11 scenarios on closing schools and repurposing of where we need to go. We took a motion on a resolution that said, we're going to focus on Fairfield, regardless of racial imbalance. We're going to focus on our programming. We're going to find out how much we need. We're going to focus on ECC. We're going to focus on our schools, and we're going to get our business in order. There are things here that are a decade late. And I think it's important that we have a clear direction to the boards who, yes, ultimately fund these things, not this board, but a direction to our community on all of our schools, not just the ECC, Dwight and Jennings, Ludlow, and the middle schools, and all of them that are in here. So I do hope that this actually passes, and I understand that there are concerns on other aspects, and I don't agree with them, but I understand that. And Mr. Issa, what I feel is this: we've been asking hard questions for over a decade, and long before that, at some point, there needs to be an actual answer. So with that, I will take it to the board. All in favor of the adoption of this? Sorry. Was there, I did go out to public? Public?
She went to public.
And commented.
Back to the.
Pardon me?
Oh, I'm sorry, I have something to get to.
I did come back, yes, thanks, because then Jen went. All right, all in favor of the Fairfield Public Schools, the 24-20-35 Fairfield Public Schools Long Range Facility Plan as amended this evening. All in favor? Mrs. Rinaldi, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Jacobson, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Flynn, Mr. Lee, Mr. Krasnov, opposed? Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Maxton Kennelly. Thank you. Motion passes 7-2. Thank you. Thank you for everyone for your work on this. All right. Approval of the 23-24 budget transfers. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the following. Can I get any objection to the waiving of the reading? Okay, I'm waiving everyone. All right, I just do want to point out that this motion is a little bit different. Oh no, not this one. This is fine. Any questions on this? Recommended motion with been waived. Any questions on the transfers? We need a second. I need a second. Mr. Asa, thank you. Mr. Asa first. Yeah.
I make a motion.
JJ makes the motion. Mr. Asa seconds the motion. Any discussion on this? Transfers? No? All right, out to the board. Any vote, any public comment, public transfers? Back to the board. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. The next one, there are changes from the first read. And that was because we got an updated number in your June 11th. It was about $251,000 estimated for this item. It actually got an actual number of $246,346. So just a couple of changes were made in leadership to make it equate to that balance. So the first read had for the Promethean boards 077, that got changed to 97,000 even. And then 4 kilns were added for $26,000. So that's just 2 changes that were made.
With my kills.
I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that there were changes from the first read before we voted on it, that's all. To equate to the new number.
Just waiting for the second.
Oh, second, Mr. Krasnoff, I'm sorry.
I also have a question.
Mr. Krasnoff, second, sorry, it's getting late, I'm sorry. What was your question, Mr.?
Very quick question. What's the process of proposing to possibly spend some of this money a different way? Is there a process to do that?
The process would be to amend the motion with a proposal that would stay within the overall balance. And to have a second for that and for it to pass.
Well, just my concern, if we pass this and we need this for, let's say, the chiller, or let's say now with the new Mona Terrace info that we need to spend some money to investigate other plans, which we didn't foresee, unfortunately. I'm concerned we won't have funds to do.
So this is 23-24 year-end expenditure, so I could have Mrs. Laborious come up because I believe this needs to at least be encumbered or some PO'd in some way by June 30th, unless we get a carryover.
Yeah, so we only have two days left. We do have started the project because we're on a modified accrual basis. Pretty much, I think we're there, you know, and I get it because we did just bring up the chiller, but I was just talking with Ingrid. That'll likely have to be a partial, you know, we'll be able to do a partial of it and get it started. But besides that, yeah, we've got to have all those purchases.
So what would be the process, I guess, during the summer to approve funds, since we probably won't meet? You just do it.
Monday, just a new fiscal year.
Yeah, and we have the appropriation, so, you know, within the major maintenance projects, if it's a priority, and then we report out at the board. I just wanted to note, there was one other change. The other change was the interreading,
Oh, yeah, sorry, the inter-reading was reduced.
to afford the kilns. Yeah, I mean, not to afford it, but because Ms.
It
Goss.
was reduced from the original 52,537. That was in our first read down to 22,726. So that was a big reduction that afforded us to do some other things, so.
That is one city things to, right, Stani and Ms. Goss.
Okay, but thank you for the question, I appreciate that. Anyone else? All right, I will take it out to the public. Any public comment on the year-end expenditures? If not, back to the board, all in favor.
One
Sorry?
question.
Sure.
So just to be clear, in order to afford the AP Psych books, we didn't need to use any of this. We've got that from elsewhere.
Correct.
Discuss it though, Jen. All right, all in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item, approval is board 2025 school nutrition meal pricing. Mr. Asa, if you don't mind, I'm gonna run out. Fair enough, for a second.
Yep.
With the recommended motion.
Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the 24-25 school nutrition and meal pricing per the June 11th, 20 memo, representing a quarter increase in both the breakfast and lunch meal prices. Can I get a motion? By Mrs. Cannell. Any discussion on this? Okay, out to the public. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, coming back to the board, all in favor?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, so that is Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Kennelly, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Flynn, Mr. Lee, Mr. Krasnoff. Abstaining is Mrs. Rinaldi and absent is Mrs. Jacobson. Next item, recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the AP Psychology curriculum, enclosure number 3. Can we get a motion? Mrs. Flynn, seconded by Mr. Lee.
The approval.
So are there any questions on this item or enclosure number 3? Being none, out to the public. Any questions on this agenda item?
Questions?
Public comments. Seeing none, back to the board. All in favor? It is 7-0 with Mrs. Jacobson, and 8-0 with Mrs. Jacobson absent. Okay, approval of the AP Psychology textbook. The recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the AP Psychology textbook, Myers Psychology, AP course, 4th edition. Can I have a motion? Mr. Lee, seconded by Mr. Peterson. Questions, Mrs. Canali?
If, just because I did communicate with Mr. Testani about this, and just for the information of the board, since I didn't include everybody on, if you could explain how it ended up being about 40,000, correct? 43,000? And that's coming out of,
Instructional from this year that we had set aside when we budgeted last year. There were things like professional development and supplies. So there was a little bit of a buffer at the end of the year. So we're using that for this.
thank you.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other questions on the textbook? All right, any public comment on approval of the AP Psychology textbook? None. All right, back to the board. All in favor? Mrs. Rinaldi, Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Maxicali, Mrs. Jacobson, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Lynn, Mr. Lee, absent, Mr. Krasnoff, and Mr. Asa. I guess no one's opposed, right? Nope, that's it. Motion passes 7-0. All right, approval of policies. Recommended motion that the Board of following policies. Can I get a waiving? Did anyone object to the waiving?
No.
We're trying this new here. We're gonna see if we can do it. Putting them all together on a somewhat of a consent calendar. Anyone have any questions on any of these policies? Mr. Lee? I need a second. Mr. Peterson, thank you. Thanks. Mr. Lee?
On policy 6115, ceremonies, United States flag, pledge of allegiance. I totally respect people don't want to say the pledge or whatever, but what I can't understand is, and this, no matter what happens, we have no say, it's a state mandate. We're teaching our kids in this school district to love one, respect all, and everything. I think it's extremely disrespectful that you have a student, he may not believe in the pledge, whatever, but he should stand up when they say the pledge. How do you explain that when little Tommy brings his grandfather in from Veterans Day, who says, I fought for this flag, and that child's not standing up? That's the most disrespectful thing. They don't have to say the pledge, but the fact that child doesn't stand up, to me, is how can you tell a child, you know what, he looks different than you, but you respect him, you respect him for his views. But yet your classmate respects the flag or the Pledge of Allegiance. It's okay, just sit down. So I think as much as I want to vote against it, or for it, I think it just has to be known. I think you can't teach one thing and expect another when it comes to Pledge of Allegiance and the flag. Again, they don't have to say it, but stand up and respect your classmates, respect your guests, respect your visitors. We pride ourselves on Veterans Day in this town. The veterans come in. My mentor on building committees, Tom Quinn, one of the biggest veterans around. And yet, if he comes to the classroom, God rest his soul, the kid doesn't have to stand up. I just think that's the most disrespectful thing, and I said my piece, but we can't change it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lee. Anyone else on the policies? All right, I'll take it out to the public. Any public comment on the approval of these policies? If not, back to the board. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, new business, board input, curriculum, social studies.
Good evening, academic officer. Our presentation this evening will be led by our program director of baseball social studies, Ina Oliver. Their department chairs. So I thank the board for the feedback they have provided thus far on the document. It is included in the packet what we had as a the document is still open for feedback if you are wanted to have there. We also have updated the form to allow separate tabs for each of the levels, including K5, 6, 8, 9, 12. And doing so, the original comments to remove that as separate tabs so that they are preserved. With that, I will, just say, actually, if this curriculum will come before the Board of Education in the fall of, or early winter of 2025, so we do have time to plan. Which is dissimilar to the other ones we did, which are in the fall 2024. So yeah, thank you for the comments, and we will, I'll pass it over to Ms. Alexander presentation.
Thank you. Just an important thing tonight, but I wish we should call this so. She's my right, she's the department leader for Fairfield Level High School. Colleen has been with us for 19 years. Not only has she been a social studies educator here, but she also has 2 children with 10 Fairfield Public Schools. Now left is Mark Drexel. He is Fairfield Lawrence Department leader. He's been for 14 years. Both Mark and Colleen very well respected in the social studies department. They serve as a mentor, cooperating teachers, and often on formal and informal levels are sought out by their colleagues for advice and expertise. So I'm honored to sit here with them. Let's see if I can get this. Sometimes it's super sensitive and sometimes it's not sensitive. So. Here we go. I appreciate Dr. Stavajancic offering a little context to folks viewing from home who may have watched our world language and our library media counterparts at the Board of Ed meeting on June 11th. They provided a similar presentation. These presentations are part of the new Board of Ed policy, which states that the Board of Ed shall give input on its curriculum expectations and community priorities. Even though we're providing the Board of Ed with this update just 2 weeks after the World Language and Library Media departments presented theirs, it's worth noting that those 2 departments, social studies, are at different stages in the curriculum cycle. They are seeking Board of Ed approval in the fall of 2024. The social studies department won't be up for Board of Ed curriculum approval until the fall of 2025. We are still 1.5 years away and are at the early stages of our curriculum revision process. As a matter of fact, until last month, when the policy was put into place, the social studies department is technically still in the implementation phase of this curriculum cycle that's illustrated here. This implementation stage was just replaced with what is called the status update stage now. This slide illustrates the alignment of the National Social Studies frameworks, the college, career, and civic readiness. They align with our mission and vision statement. The Fairfield Public School mission statement is to ensure that every student acquires the knowledge and skills needed to be a lifelong learner, responsible citizen, successful participant in society. Social studies is committed to preparing students for career, college, and civic life. The C3 frameworks helps fortify Fairfield's vision of graduate by cultivating students who are resilient learners, strong communicators, collaborators, critical thinkers, and responsible citizens. It's also worth noting that the Connecticut Social Studies frameworks adopted in 2015 mirror the national C3 framework mentioned on the previous slide. In October of 2023, the State Board of Education approved the new Connecticut Elementary and Secondary Social Studies Standards, which further strengthen and support our state and national frameworks. These are the first social studies content standards in Connecticut's history. The process of developing the new social studies standards started in 2021, when a steering committee was formed and research began. The standards project was co-directed by the Connecticut State Department of Education and the Connecticut Council of Social Studies. The Social Studies Standards Steering Committee, writing teams, reviewers consisted of a dedicated team of over 100 elementary school, middle school, high school, college, university, faculty from across Connecticut representing urban and suburban communities. The inquiry arc in social studies is vital to cultivating critical thinkers and informed citizens. There are 4 dimensions to the inquiry arc for social studies and social studies research. It is not an open inquiry model or a free for all, and it stresses the value of gathering content knowledge. It's guided inquiry and guided work grounded in essential and supporting questions posed by teachers and students to anchor their research. In dimension 1, seen in here on this slide in green, students consider the course and unit essential questions, compelling understandings, and supporting questions. In dimension 2, students apply the core content and disciplinary standards of history, geography, civics, and economics in order to gather information. In dimension 3, students evaluate sources and give evidence to develop claims. Dimension 4 involves communicating the conclusions, taking informed action. This is the culminating process of the inquiry arc. The inquiry arc is a cornerstone to social studies education. However, and this is really important, since 2015, educators requested more content guidance beyond themes and concepts. You'll notice that dimension 2 is highlighted in yellow here. And that is to indicate on this slide that this was the focus of many of the content standards for the Connecticut's new social studies standards, which were approved by the Connecticut Board of Education in October of 23. This slide simply provides some examples of dimension 2, the new content standard. Students apply civics, economics, geography, and history at every grade level, but we're highlighting one discipline at each grade level to give you an idea of what the content standards look like. These are the 4 core disciplinary lenses used in social studies. Connecticut's new content standards provide examples or EGs in each standard. It is worth noting that the EGs provided in these standards are neither exclusive nor exhaustive. And what is meant by that is districts do not have to cover all of the examples provided, and they are not bound or limited to only the examples that are provided in the content standards.
The current Fairfield Public Schools pre-K install social studies curriculum by our Board of Education. It's closely aligned with the Connecticut Social Studies frameworks, which helped Fairfield establish its vertical alignment of skills and concepts from elementary through high school. As Fairfield Public School students will progress through grade newly released social studies content standards complement the ACT frameworks and the current Fairfield Public School curriculum quite well. In middle school, students take World Regional Studies 1, World Regional Studies 2 in 6th and 7th grade. Currently, students take United States history, American Revolution, and modern era 8th grade. Social studies is the core social studies systems in 9th grade. And modern global studies is the core social studies course in 10th grade. Fairfield Public School students take U.S. history in 11th grade while they're taking American literature in their English courses. Notice from the chart seen above that beginning in 10th grade, students may enroll in advanced placement courses. Thereafter, students choose from a variety of electives such as economics, psychology, sociology. Students may take civics, which is a state graduation requirement, in addition to an FBS graduation requirement from 11th or 12th grade. What are the shifts we're considering after our preliminary investigation of scope and frequency, actually opening up more opportunities? This is prior.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've spent the past year preparing for our first cycle. Can everyone hear me? First, in September, Fairfield was lucky enough to join one of 5 other districts to be a part of the Study Standards Advancement Cohort. So we got to meet with other districts to learn about the standards, to start to deep dive the standards, talk about how we might want to prioritize them, use them to shape our new scope. And we also were lucky enough to receive a personalized presentation from the Connecticut State Department of Education on these new social studies standards. So all of the middle school and high school teachers receive professional development directly from the source. From there, we brainstormed a vision, purpose, and mission, as well as we started to develop and brainstorm some high quality instruction statements that we could use to help us guide the process as we started to open the discussion about a potentially revised scope and sequence. One of the first steps to doing that is we audited the pre-K to 12 social studies curriculum of neighboring districts and those in our DIRG. And one of the things that we noticed in that audit, which was echoed in some of the feedback that was left on the document, is that we wanted to change our elective offerings to be more robust so that we offer a program that rivals what some of the other districts had. We also wanted to create a scope and sequence that was a little bit more flexible for students, and we started to use this audit as a great way to start our own discussion. In April, we as a high school department and a middle school department started to brainstorm potential changes to scope and sequence. We have not made definitive decisions yet because we are so early in the process, but it was really important to make sure before we left for the summer that we had everyone's voices. There were questions about like what teachers were thinking, especially regarding US history, which I will get to, but these were some of the discussions that we started to have. And then before we left for the summer, we gave a survey to social studies students about potential new elective offerings. We were able to get results from 850 students, and we included in the presentation that their top choices were psychology and sociology, which we already offer and are very popular, but also students showed a lot of interest in genocide studies and history through film and theater, which they're in high school, of course, but we've had a lot of other positive results in incorporate as we continue over this. So moving into the summer and moving into next year, we have a lot of things that we have not put into paper and started to write any curriculum documents yet. We're going to take the work that we did last year and hopefully something to get started on that process this summer through taking a lot of steps. First, we're going to deep dive the new social studies standards, make sure that all members of the department read them, understand them, and then we can start prioritizing the standards that we want to use. We want to reinvest and do some professional development in understanding by design, backwards design, and that's part of our curriculum orientation that we're going to be having this summer for teachers who are participating in writing it. We're going to look at the student survey results again, try to pick up some trends and make some decisions on what are some of the new electives that we would like to offer. The state also has published a model curriculum for K-8 that we are going to look at, evaluate, decide what pieces we may or not want to use. We're going to review as a group the new FPS curriculum template. And then we're going to start to write, review, and revise over the summer and then the duration of the school year, these new curricula drafts. From there, we will look at resources, budget for textbooks, etc. And then Finally, we're going to investigate the development of a leadership and public service pathway, as well as potentially investigate and design a social studies portfolio. So we will be busy.
So before we close, the little bit has already submitted some written input on questions that we want to speak to now, if we haven't already addressed in the presentation. As far as ELA units are concerned, we do value that cross-disciplinary work.
Could we have the lights on?
Sure. Social studies is grounded in literacy, and when the ELA curriculum was presented, also we need to support social studies and science along the way, vocabulary, foundational text. A few Board of Ed members also mentioned the importance of learning geography. Fortunately, geography is one of the core content disciplines focused on in the new Connecticut social studies. For example, in grade 1, students begin working with and using math in the community. Grade 4, the standard focuses on physical geography in regions of the country. Grade 6, there are continued work and focus on world geographic, as well as grade 7, movement and cultural diffusion.
One of the other questions was about our high school program or 9th and 10th program. Currently, students take, it's a 2-year curricular arc, essentially the 9th grade year. Studies. So, and then, yeah.
I apologize. I got a text from somebody at home. I cannot hear you.
Okay.
So I was just hoping I can hear you fine, but someone at home can't. So nice to know that somebody is still listening.
Oh, I was upset. Everybody left.
They're all watching from home. Don't worry. Speak up.
So currently, it's a 2-year curricular arc, and the 10th grade year being modern studies picks up 1750 through today. And the wisdom of the time was to give students a 2-year program where they would get a world view of history from ancient through modern day, and then here they jump into this history and see what role the United States plays in all of that. In our preliminary conversations right now, we're thinking about retooling that 9th grade year. There were some concerns that the 9th grade year was just a skills course. I can ensure that it is one of the most content-driven courses that we have. And so the idea being, when we reviewed the vertical alignment of our 6th and 7th grade programs and our 9th grade program, there was a lot of overlap to content, which meant that if we took the 10th grade program, the modern global studies program, we could expand that out, add more units, add more content, and include more skills driven work there too. So that's a preliminary discussion right now of retooling our sequence so that we can add more content or skills for our students.
One of the pieces of feedback also offered in the document that we looked at was that there is in our current scope and sequence some rigidity. And this is something that we agree with, and this is something that we really are looking to change in this new iteration. One of the things that we want to make sure we're doing is that we are creating more robust electives that are open to students. Right now, we have most students until they're juniors to take electives, and that's something that we certainly want to change, especially because with the new health and PE requirement, students are going to have a lot of room in their schedule, likely sophomore year. So that's something that we really want to open up all social studies electives to students earlier. We also want to be creative with the electives that we offer with the graduation requirements. For example, as we mentioned in the previous meeting, psych can count as a STEM credit. We were thinking about developing just, for example, we're not committed yet, but maybe an art history elective that could count as a fine arts requirement, etc. We want to be creative, and we want to give students the opportunity to take these classes earlier. One thing that also came up that we have been debating is keeping US history in the 11th grade. And when we looked at some other districts, we saw many offered in 10th grade. The sticking point for us, and we're open to feedback on this, is the interdisciplinary connections that are able to be made between US history and US lit, which as per the ELA curriculum is studied in the junior year, especially with the American Studies course, which is one of our most valued interdisciplinary experiences that we have in Fairfield Public Schools. We're a little stuck because we don't really know how we could address that if we move to US history. As far as US history, one of the things that you'll note from the state standards is that their standards start US history at Reconstruction. So this has been a really big topic of conversation within the department. That also isn't new. The state standards suggested that US history start with Reconstruction in its 2015 iteration. We chose not to follow that. So right now we're in discussion amongst the department, and it's pretty split, to be honest. There are really compelling arguments on both sides. Those who want to start it in Reconstruction really feel like we haven't been able to give students modern experience and learn about things really post 9/11. If you look at the actual curriculum document, the last year that's technically in there I alluded to global terrorism and how the United States could respond to terrorism, but there's like a year and teachers aren't reliably getting there just because it's really conflict. So that's the biggest argument for why we might want to change it. However, there is a really compelling argument that in 8th grade, students don't necessarily have the maturity to talk about some of the harder parts of our history, and really to interact with the founding of our republic, which is one of the most important things that you could learn with the maturity level that would be necessary. So we're all grappling with this and are split on that. So that's where we are right now.
Do you have a question, Mr. Peterson?
Can I ask a question just on that? And this is kind of an esoteric way to think about this. I understand the argument that Reconstruction versus other countries have much longer historical timeframes than we do. Do educators look abroad for, how England has 1,000 years easy? They could put, like, how do they do it in countries that have longer than kind of a 400-year window? I mean, is that, you don't have to give me an answer, but is that something that you look to as a model for how to deal with that?
And one of the things that we're really committed to is that whatever the document is that we develop for US history, that it is doable consistently across all classrooms. So that might mean we're editing, or doing a better job pruning or editing.
I understand you have a finite number of minutes, and that's a challenge across the board. But I just, in terms of, I mean, a lot of what you do, obviously, in curriculum docs is prioritize. And I wonder if there are positive examples you can use in countries with extended Japan that must have this same issue.
China.
Okay, just a few more things that you populated the document with to progress. There was a question about changes at the state level. And as far as new state legislation, yes, some of you are very familiar with Public Act 21-12, which required the Connecticut State Department of Education to include in its K-8 model curriculum topics such as Native American Studies, Asian American and Pacific Islander Studies, Civics and Citizenship. Connecticut's new content standards include these of underrepresented populations of the past, and they're also included in the model curriculum, the K-8 curriculum. There was mention too of the value of the portfolio. It's not our intention to make a social studies portfolio that advance a unit of study. It's simply cross-disciplinary opportunities. Portfolios potentially as a way for our students to showcase their skill and knowledge, to measure their growth over their experience, to build an agency, and to diversify their expressions. So we wanted to address those questions that you've kindly populated in the document for us tonight. Any additional comments or insights? We're happy to-
Thank you very much. Mr. Lee?
Real quick, I apologize if I miss it. Civics still come into play in the high school at junior year? Because I think that's kind of a.
So civics.
That's what? Civics?
Right now, we have 5 offerings for civics. We have 2 at the AP level, and then 2 elective semester offerings. We do want to create a unified, more standard vision for civics. That's something that the department really has prioritized, but yes, civics is a state requirement, so we will continue to offer it.
Mr. Gaza?
I just want to start off by thanking you. I really appreciate you didn't just read from the slide. You guys gave us a lot more information. Told us a little bit more about your process, what your thought process right now, where you think you're gonna go. Obviously, things may change. I do ask, as I did with the LA, to really look at as much interdisciplinary as possible. I heard about the high schools, but for me, the middle and elementary is really where I think we can do some really good work. I would love them to learn about Greek mythology and maybe ancient Greece at the same time, so it's not too spread out. Things like that, if we can align it, I think it will benefit all our students, especially as they move forward into high school. They have a really good base of knowledge, so they can understand the coursework a little better. Thank you.
Lindsay?
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for this presentation. I can't stop smiling because I'm so excited about it. And I didn't input my questions, so I have actually a follow-up about that. But just some quick comments I wanted to make just in response to this approach, which I think sounds like has been so thorough. So I'm impressed with that. I love the way that you're breaking it down and you've sought feedback from your student community, the teachers. I'm just really happy with the way this is going, and thank you for us. Just want to respond to the idea of bringing art history to this program, which is like so thrilling for me to hear. So that's something I'm personally really interested in. And then I started just brainstorming in my own head, and I got really excited, started thinking about cross-disciplinary program that might touch upon classical studies with our Latin program, which sometimes needs a little bit of extra marketing. So that sort of got me thinking about that. Student interested in that, but I would be curious if that would be something that would be even interested in exploring. The idea of the portfolio is exciting to me. So I guess where I'm coming at is I have all these ideas and thoughts based on this conversation, based on your responses to this document. And what I'd like to understand, and I'd love for the board members to understand, is how does our feedback come into play with the actions you take? For example, when we respond to a budget document, right, when we're going through that process, we intentionally do not repeat comments from other board members, right? Because we're looking for answers. But here, for example, if you're collecting thoughts and trying to get a sense of the body, in fact, it would be in everyone's best interest if all board members made comments on, I don't know, everything or some things, or I'm not really sure how to approach this, and the process is so new to us. I feel like it feels, not that it's flawed, but this was an interesting exercise. Obviously got a lot of comments from a small number of board members. And I think even after today, I would imagine a lot of board members would have more feedback. So what should that look like? How can we help relay this to you? And maybe this is through the chair question for Dr. Socio-emotional. How would you be interpreting our responses to take whatever actions you would take, if that makes sense?
But we are learning along with you.
Mhm.
In this
Right.
process. It's important to how we collect the data for it to get a sense of the body. I do think it's important that if you see it on there, you can, say, I agree. I know a few of you have done that. Say, I agree with this person's document. I think this meeting also is important to get a sense of what individual members are thinking about. And then after we get it, we'll leave the document open, as I said, and then after we get it, we'll meet as a department to go through and see how we can incorporate those pieces and the feasibility of them over the next year and a half, which is different than the other two because they've already started working. This one, we have a lot more time to plan ahead and be able to give you a document and product that you're expecting and based on what you told us.
Okay, so this document, just to kind of reiterate and help clarify, this document will remain open. There's a new tab, so this is static, and then the rest will be managed throughout the process. And you are encouraging everyone at this board table to make as many comments as needed to show support or for these different thoughts and ideas. Would you also ever need to reach out to us again with specific concerns about, I don't want to use the word controversy, but I kind of will. If there was an idea that you wanted to implement that you wanted board feedback on, I would be open to that. I just, or not, I don't know. I'm just, you know, I don't.
Like meaning we're doing this document and then we'll see the first draft.
And that might be okay, but we are also here if it's helpful.
If you can come back, I'm sure we would work it out with the superintendent or chair, based on what is put in there. This document is not static, just to go back to your first question. So I simply added 3 additional tabs and I left one called originals. You could add to any of them if you wanted to. Within there, I just didn't want to start moving people's comments around. Once they place them in there. So yeah, it will be open. We do want more comments if we need them, or if you guys want to provide them. And if we have clarifying or other questions that come up, we'll make sure that we involve those parties.
Thank you.
Mrs. Lynn?
Hi, thank you so much. I just have a few quick follow-ups. I was able to put a few thoughts in. I want to reiterate Mr. Krasnoff that look at the interdisciplinary learning, especially at our middle school level, where we said this for ELA. I think I said this for library media. We have a pretty tremendous investment in that team-based model, and I think that middle school is kind of a good time. And I specify project-based learning in the document for elementary school, and I also see that continuation in middle school to that living project idea. And I love a PowerPoint, thank you for it, but I think we do see a lot of that, and I think to see some living projects, we live in such a rich community, and as Mr. Krasnoff spoke to, Greek history, like I've seen in prior districts that I had the opportunity to work in and ones I attended myself, that those project-based living experiences, especially at that, middle school age, can kind of hook kids really quick to why they love civics or why they love US history or Greek mythology. So any opportunity kind of to force our middle school kids or our elementary school kids to live something, I think is a good opportunity, and I would love to see that. The high school work, I also, any flexibility for 9th and 10th grade. I think we see a little bit of our gap in our humanities, and I think US history and any flexibility you can give our kids to take more if that's what their desire is, I would fully support. And then a comment that a few other members had, and I also did. As I said, I know that we have some embedded experiences currently that all of our elementary schoolers experience at our Fairfield Museum, which I'll give a public accolade to. I've had the opportunity to chaperone, I think, every trip because it's the first one I put in for, and what a gift to our community. But I do know that we do see a discrepancy in our elementary schools between field trips that are, and I don't really know how this works, but are chosen. So I know that some of our elementary schools take field trips to places like Sturbridge and Mystic, and they're embedded in the history curriculum. My children experience that at North Sheffield. I know that other schools are not doing trips like that and are going to quasi or like compounds or et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not looking to take anything away, but I do think that we might want to examine that embedded experience and encouraging it. I mean, once again, we live in a very rich historical area, and to not take advantage of that for our elementary and middle school kids just kind of seems like a missed opportunity in my opinion. So that's really all my feedback, but thank you so much. And I appreciate Ms. Guernsey's reiteration that if there is additional feedback needed, and Dr. Savachansik has been great about being flexible with the document and how you take the information. So it's much appreciated.
Just have a quick question about process. We're trying to absorb all this information, and we kind of learned this with the ELA. It's a lot, and I know it's a lot of work for you, but it's also a lot of reading and looking at a lot of stuff. If it's possible, and I can't speak for all the members, but I'm speaking for a few that feel similar. If there's any way we can kind of break it down, like high school, middle school, elementary school, so that we're not trying to look at the entire document at the same time. I think you might get more valuable feedback that way to, you know, break it down a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of questions, I just lost my place. So again, just to reiterate, because I appreciate Mrs. Guernsey's question, because when Ms. Goss came up regarding the ELA curriculum, she was very explicit that when she saw what she perceived as a majority feedback, it directed her actions. Something else which might have been a very good point as well, when the rest of us didn't reiterate it explicitly, it was not considered. And so that concerns me, because obviously I don't want you to come up here in, you know, the next fall in 15 months and receive a lot of pushback on the work that you do, if there's something that we really want to see. So is that your feeling, Dr. Zapjanzik, of, okay, to oversimplify, that it's going to be a majority rule kind of thing? I mean, obviously, knowing that if staff had objection to what the majority was saying, you know, then we need to hear that. But is that the sense that if something's a good idea, but at least 5 people don't repeat it and staff don't want to do it, then it dies there?
I would say no, because there's a number of ideas in here that I think are good, that we may have not considered at this point, but maybe only one member said, but perhaps it needs a column for like upvoting things. So you don't have to repeat things, but you just add your name to the end to say that, you know, I agree here, like, let's, you know, with this, so you're not having multiple comments of it. So I can figure out how to do that on Google and put it in. But I don't think that a individual comment is, it's only for the pictures that sometimes those are the ones that can carry something through that we need to consider. So I wouldn't say specific to the one members.
Okay. Fair enough. Something else, a course like genocide studies. You bring up something which, you know, immediately could be a flashpoint of controversy. You know, the word genocide right now is a controversial word, which I would have argued a year ago was a straightforward word, you know. And so how would you handle something like that? And what is going to be your approach to the curriculum planning? I mean, obviously we've got 2 major conflicts going on right now, Ukraine and Russia. We have Israel and what's going on with, you know, the Gaza Strip and the Palestinian territory. So it's, how are you going to navigate that? What is going to be your approach philosophically as you put this together? And obviously that's also why the genocide studies course raises concerns.
Well, you know, students had expressed that they're interested in genocide studies and understanding so. And I agree with you, very astute observation. The word genocide, it means something different today than maybe it meant 2 years ago to many people. So we will, in social studies, we are constantly navigating controversy. Constantly. And we feel like we have a responsibility to do so. And we will handle all of our courses in the same manner that we do. We do that every day in students, US history, all the studies. It really doesn't matter which course it is. What we are really committed to is developing skills in our student body so that they are able to navigate controversial issues, to speak with each other and to each other with respect, to evaluate source materials, authors, credibility or reliability. And we will continue to, you know, use and employ those skills in the development of the courses and the continuation of the courses.
So as a follow-up to that, I always appreciate, you know, that skills are being taught, being reinforced. I would argue that skills have to be formed by the facts. You know, you can't evaluate a source if you don't have a bed of knowledge to do so. Maybe you can identify inflammatory language, provocative language, language with bias, but even that comes from a place of knowledge and facts. So I would be remiss if I didn't put out there, you know, out front, I'm sure this does not surprise you, that.
And we don't disagree with that at all. Yeah.
It's which wonderful. But I just wanted to say it explicitly because I don't think I actually, well, all right, I did a little bit, actually probably in my largest box. But besides that one time, I did want to mention that I have to come back to, I enormously appreciate, I agree with Mrs. Jacobson about loving that 7th grade geography, but I have to come back to, I'm going to be looking for that word automaticity, you know, and that is straight up memorization because that forms then analysis. If you're talking about, you know, the Transcontinental Railroad, if you're, I'm just going to go to American history, you know, but when you're talking about the Kansas-Nebraska Act, when you're talking about these things, the Mason-Dixon line, and take it from me, they don't know geography. Generally, unless it's something their parents have as something they enjoy doing at home. And it changes everything. You know, when you think the Mississippi River is the border between New Mexico and Mexico, sorry, but carry that over. Good luck with Huck Finn. You're going to fundamentally not get something about that story. And, you know, when you think Libya is the Atlantic Ocean, true story. It's going to affect your understanding in literature of the Odyssey. I mean, they need maps. I'm begging you that automaticity is something that is in this curriculum. And again, not just an American thing, again, worldwide. I love the mention there of, I don't remember what I think it was a transportation topic with Nairobi. Good luck. Say that word to somebody and say, point out, you know, the country and, you know, find Kenya. They won't. In fact, if they identified a country that was contiguous, I would be impressed. And it changes everything. And it's so, I just don't want to fight. Yeah, I mean, it is really important to me. I hope it's important to my fellow board members. There were just a few of my other questions I wanted to follow up on because I don't know if this would be something people would just want to, you know, offer support for opposition to now. But the African American Latino Studies course, which I know we had floated this idea that I put in the document, but knowing the interest in offering more electives and knowing what I think would be a great deal more interest in the course if it was also semesterized as options, just in terms of fitting into kids' schedules. Is that something that would be considered?
You know, we've always been in favor of semesterizing the Black and Latino Studies course, and we are not unique as a district. When we formed the committee and investigated the course, we were hopeful that that would be the case. Unfortunately, the way the legislation is written, don't have that flexibility. I have heard in my travels that there's been a lot of resistance to the state about that. And there is potential further down the line for that to take place. We would welcome that.
We'll have to, I think what you're asking, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we continue to offer the legislative mandated course.
Absolutely.
Plus offer an option at the one level so that we are meeting the legislative requirement. And students can either sign up for one or both. If they need to.
I am absolutely not advocating for going counter to the statute, which does require the full year, that we have this as a full year course offering. Absolutely. But then why not go beyond? It just, so I don't know if anyone else has an opinion on that, but.
I just wanted to speak to that course, or I can wait till you're done.
Give me a couple more and then I'll be done. Or do you want, go ahead now. You look disappointed.
I was very passionate about that course when it was presented to our board and was disappointed that it didn't pass the board's acceptance as a US history course. So I hoped as part of this process, personally hoped that we might revisit this course and take a closer look at how it's been implemented with our, you know, the curriculum, and the part of it was the timing and pacing and what the content was that was included, and sort of get some kind of update on it. And I would be interested to see if the recommendation would be put forward that it would be reconsidered as US history.
Okay. I feel the need to say this. No one ever argued it was not US history, ever. That was never a statement.
Okay.
What was argument was fulfilling the state mandated requirement, which is very different from saying that the course is not US history.
Then I'll just clarify that I meant that it would fulfill the state mandate. That's what I'm interested in.
Just a couple more comments I wanted to make. I appreciate what you said about the social studies portfolio. I would really be very sensitive myself when we get that presentation to like, I appreciate you're saying not as a unit, because my concern comes exactly back to the point about time. And I'm interested in them learning more stuff than devoting a significant amount of time to a portfolio. Oh, again, open to hearing more, but something that's going to be very time intensive and therefore take away from, let's make it to the 1980s, I wouldn't be in favor of, but, obviously open to hearing more. Has there ever been thought to doing something like a year and a half of global and therefore having a year and a half of US history?
That has been kicked around as part of our brainstorming.
We're brainstorming everything right now. And some of our meetings look like some of your meetings.
Sorry.
And, that's the line of the night. How we can best utilize our students' time, so they can learn as much as possible. So it's noted, we'll continue to push that out.
I think that would be a potentially really creative solution to what, again, no matter what, I love my department, I love my curriculum, but for our students, it's hard to argue that it's right there as the most important course of study they're going to take. I really do believe that in terms of that content. So,
Follow up on that?
sure.
You're not saying that US history would be required as a year and a half,
I don't know.
just because that would take away from other.
No, fair point, because I think someone could fulfill that with AP US history in a year because that class is designed to move at a much faster pace. I don't know. It was just the thought. But thank you for that reminder. That is a fair point. Let me just quick look down to see if there were any others that I wanted to. I also reiterate Mrs. Flynn's concern about having some assured experience. I think Sturbridge Village is great. We obviously lost or have the Washington DC trip has gone away. But there may be, we never actually got a definitive reason to the board of why, was it insurance? Was it something else? Obviously there are practicalities we have to be sensitive to, but still interested. And then other than that, I had some more specific questions in here, but if I don't get answers to them, then you can anticipate them in 16 months. So thank you so much.
I put all my comments in there sometimes, time to do it or whatever, on the document, but I'll just reiterate at the sequencing options for younger grades and being, what I feel is incredibly rigid, in terms of what people can take in what grade. So for now, and then also, at the K-5 level, I know that there's many of us that are going to be interested in understanding time. And I think that's already been brought up. Sometimes social studies and science seem to feel like if we get to it subjects, and I know I'll be looking for a dedicated, some sort of situation, around the K-5. So just to hone in a couple of, sorry.
And that's been addressed for the coming school year very explicitly to every elementary school administration about the dedicated time for social studies and for science.
Thank you very much.
I apologize. You referenced comments.
My comments on the sheet.
I think they were
They're not
on the
printed before the package. I printed Wednesday night, I think, or Thursday morning, they probably put it out and I think they came in.
We did see.
Oh,
They're in there, they're just not in the paper. It's fine.
Okay.
Comments are in that.
Okay.
If you go through the visit sheet.
Could you send that back out again, just so it's at the top of the email box? Thank you.
You're off from work. How can you have email?
Still working. All right. So again, the preferences is that comments for this Excel sheet, even if it's to reiterate what somebody else said or not, as we know how this will be used, by June 30th, right? Is that for this one as well? Because I know world language and library media is for sure June 30th. This one is not the same, not a rush.
Not as big of a rush. I think if we go into July, we'll be fine.
Okay, so library, media, and world language, we need those in by the 30th. If anyone's gonna say anything, otherwise we have time on this one. Okay. Thank you very much. Look forward to.
thank you very much.
All right, moving on to our next item. Approval of policy 5118, resident, non-resident school attendance. Jen, Mrs. Maxine, sorry.
So I'm making the motion.
No, I didn't put the motion on here.
Wait, hold on.
I'm
sorry, I just see that.
Yeah,
All right, yeah, there isn't one on here, so I'll make up one.
Yeah.
I don't know how that is.
I missed that.
Yeah, recommended motion that the Board of Education approve policy 5118, resident, non-resident school attendance. Can I get a motion, please? Mrs. Maxine, seconded by Mrs. Rinaldi. Thank you. Sorry, Jen. I don't know why that's.
So first, as the board obviously realizes that this breaks protocol of a first read and a vote, which was done solely because of the time, that it is our last meeting of June. I'm not asking anyone to do a special meeting for this, so hopefully all had a chance to look at it. This is something that we are interested in having in place and staff being notified of that fact as soon as it is passed. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Peterson to give some more of the backstory.
As I mentioned in the, our meeting back on the 11th, this was something that was brought to us by administration. We realized there was an issue with the extant policy that we wanted to lower the amount of tuition for children of employees. So about $6,000 was the target. It was difficult to do that with the language that was there. We brought it back to the policy committee, and it was suggested that if we just simply change the percentage down from the 35%, which was the original, to the 25%, it puts us more in line with neighboring districts, and it does get us down to that 6,000 mark. Now, having said that, we also recognized at the time, and we discussed this when I visited policy, that this policy could use a more thorough overhaul with our experience and in a couple of years under our belt. So I recommended that I take this up in policy or in finance committee in the fall and kind of start that and have a little more leg room to do that at that point. But again, approval of this will give the administration a recruitment and retention tool right now as we head into the busy hiring season.
And one of the specific retention concerns is when we had parents with multiple children. You know, they've got one in the system, to bring in a second would be cost prohibitive. And of course, that defeats the point of why we're doing this. This wasn't meant to be a revenue machine. It was exactly as Mr. Peterson said, meant to be a retention recruitment tool. So I appreciate that when it came to policy, that policy committee then proceeded to have a lot of other ideas. We were very amenable to working with that goal in mind. And so, I look forward to seeing what finance comes up with. But if there are any questions, be happy to tackle them.
Okay, do you have a question?
I just have a quick question. So you're saying you approve this, but there's gonna be another policy that comes in the fall?
We don't know. It could be that change is handled in regs. It could be actually, all right, now we need to change policy language. It really depends on the work that comes out of finance. And we don't have a specific idea of that yet because they have to dig in and do that work.
Speaking for finance, I would say that, one of the things that may have changed since we looked at this originally a few years ago is what surrounding towns are offering. So it might be time to just review on that basis, think about it as how effective is it obviously it's never meant to be revenue generated, but how effective is it for HR purposes? And then see if anything needs to be done. But just to take a look at it, seems like that's a good place to start.
Thank you.
I will take it out to the public for public comment. If not, back to the board. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Very much.
One of the only people I've ever heard you.
All right. Oh,
We were talking about that. Bottom of this, okay.
yeah. Discussion and possible action on tentative agreements with successor collective bargaining. Secretary's Union recommend motion that the Fairfield Board of Education hereby moves to provide funding for and to otherwise accept and approve the tentative agreement for a collective bargaining agreement with the Secretary's Union for the period of July 1, 2023 to June 30, 2026. The Board of Education further moves to delegate to the board chair the authority to execute the final contract document on behalf of the board. This motion is further contingent upon the Secretary's Union also signing the final contract document. Can I get a motion, please? Mr. Peterson, and seconded by Mrs. Maxon Kennelly. You don't talk about these things, so we're just going to take it to a vote. All in favor? Motion passes. Mr. Krasnoff, Mrs. Flynn, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Jacobson, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, Mr. Asa, Mr. Peterson, and Mrs. Rinaldi. Against? Abstention? Motion passes 8-0-1. All right, moving on. Discussion and possible action on tentative agreement for successor collective bargaining with the Special Education Traders Union. Trainers. Recommended motion that the Fairfield Board of Education hereby moves to provide funding for and to otherwise accept and approve the tentative agreement for collective bargaining agreement with the Special Education Trainers Union for the period of July 1, 2022 to June 30th, 2025. The Board of Education further moves to delegate to the board chair the authority to execute the final contract document on behalf of the board. This motion is further contingent upon the Special Ed Trainers Union also signing the final contract document. Can I get a motion, please? Mrs. Flynn, seconded by Mr. Krasnoff. We don't vote, so we'll go by this vote. All in favor? Mrs. Rinaldi, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Jacobson, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Flynn, Mr. Krasnoff. Opposed? Abstention? Mr. Lee? Motion passes 7-0-1. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly not in the room for that motion. All right, approval of the superintendent's contract. Recommended motion, the Fairfield Board of Education hereby elects Michael J. Testani as the superintendent of schools, subject to the terms and conditions of the applicable contract for the period of July 1, 2024 to June 30th, 2027. The board further moves to accept and approve the superintendent's contract for such period. The board further delegates to the chair the authority to execute this contract on behalf of the board. The board's approval of this contract is contingent upon Superintendent Michael J. Testani signing the contract within 1 week of today's date. Can I get a motion, please? Mr. Asa, seconded by Mrs. Flynn. Mr. Asa.
Yeah, I'm just gonna propose an amendment to this procedurally. In here, it says Mr. Testani signing the contract within 1 week of today's date. My motion is to amend to read within 10 days of today's date.
I will second that.
And just quickly, the only reason is leadership has a meeting with Mr. Testani on a date certain in July, and it would just be easier for us to just conduct all of this at that time.
All right, so then we're gonna vote on the amendment only at this point, just to change that from 7 days to 10, okay? So all in favor of that amendment? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, back to the main motion as amended. All in favor? Motion passes 9-0. Approval of Board of Education bylaw amendment, Article 3, Section 6, conflicts of interest 1. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the Board of Education bylaw amendment as proposed to Article 3, Section 6, conflicts of interest B1. The enclosures are in your packet, and I will turn this over to the board member that has brought this forward, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
So I'm making the motion.
Sure, sorry. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly and Mr. Peterson.
So this is just reflective of addressing a need without adding an agenda item. This would be purely for these two types of positions, which is subs. Could only be a long-term sub if there are qualifications. It can only be a coach if there are qualifications. But I wasn't interested, unless somebody else was, in expanding this to anything that could be deemed as a union position. This is non-union position. It's one less step to pass. I just didn't see, we've had to have multiple votes in the past couple of years, all of which passed without issue. And so I was just recognizing what has been our practice. And so why not change the bylaw?
I just want to say, I appreciate this amendment to the bylaws, and it will save us future work.
I agree. Anyone else? All right, this isn't one and done. For the first read, again, this is to set this up, so a little unusual as well, but this is a bylaw amendment, so it does require a 2/3 vote to change, so at least 6 in order to do it, so just to put that out. All right, so any public comment on this bylaw amendment? If not, I'll take it back to the board. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, approval of the minutes of the Board of Education. Following minutes, May 28, 2024, regular meeting minutes of the June 11, 2024 special meeting minutes. Can I get a motion, please? Mrs. Rinaldi, seconded by Mr. Krasnoff. Any discussion? If not, I will take this back to the board. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. All right, we have a second set of minutes that we're going to be amending, that the Board of Education amend and reapprove the May 20th, 2024 special meeting minutes. Can I get a motion, please? Mrs. Flynn, seconded by Mrs. Guernsey.
Sure. So the amendment would be, and I don't know if anyone has this in front of them, but basically what happened was, the minutes are accurate in terms of the motions failing or passing. What happened is there are 2 names listed, both Mrs. Maxon-Connelly and Mr. Lee, who were not present at the meeting, and it was just copied inadvertently. So it shows like 9 names and it should show 7. That appears 3 times. The votes are accurate. The names should not be there. So my amendment would be to delete Mrs. Maxon-Connelly and Mr. Lee from the listed names in all votes.
Any questions on that? It's just to correct the record, actually. That's all it is. Wait, am I moving? Yes, you're moving to amend the 2020-2024 special meeting minutes. We are amend and reapproving. We're amending and reapproving. So you've amended and now we're going to reapprove, hopefully. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Amended and reapproved. Thank you. Thank you. Superintendent's, superintendent's report.
Yeah, just 2 quick items. Since our last meeting, I just want to congratulate all our 2024 graduates. It was a great evening, I'm sure at Ward. I have done at Ludlow this year for all our graduates. And I do want to comment that the commencement speakers at the Ludlow graduation, all 3 did a great job. I was extremely impressed with our valedictorian speech and how he spoke about his journey throughout the year and the college application and acceptance process. And if you have a chance and you can go online and watch it, I really encourage everyone to do so. For a young man, it was quite inspiring. So one other thing I'd like to just comment on, I know there was some confusion leading up to yesterday and the start of camp over at Mill Hill. And just to say that there was innocent miscommunication in scheduling of our ESY program and the Parks and Rec camp over at Mill Hill. So that caused us to pivot. And with the help of Parks and Rec and Anthony Calabrese and his team, and also Lieutenant Wiltsey and the SRO division, making it work so that the shift over around the corner to the Walter Fitzgerald campus can be a successful one for the students and the families for that area. So for any confusion that may have caused some of the families, just an apology there again. Just a miscommunication, maybe process that will be corrected for next year. So any questions? Happy to. You're welcome.
Committee liaison reports.
Yeah, just so if the board notices in their Friday packet of upcoming meetings that Mrs. Guernsey and Mrs. Jacobson have graciously agreed to adding a special policy meeting on July 3rd, scheduled to start at 9:30, and a hard stop, and I'm not joking about this, of 3:30. We have a packet of, right here, 88 policies that we are going through as a result of the audit. The hope is that this will be a rapid process. We don't know. But one other thing that we are doing, that we have added to that also is a clean read of the class size policy, so that while we couldn't get it to, say it again?
It's the second, July
July
2nd.
2nd, what did I say, the 3rd? Oh, sorry, yes, July 2nd. And also looking to get the class size policy, clean read, corrected, any final tweaks, so that it can come back to the board for a redo of the first read at the first meeting in August. That's our hope, which I can't imagine in a potential 6-hour meeting we won't be able to conclude. But just wanted to alert the board that we'll be doing that work, and then figuring out how we're gonna put 88 policies on the agenda. I definitely think we'll be looking for some type of,
Consent agenda?
I was gonna say if anybody else wants to like join us.
yeah. I don't see it as being scintillating work, but rewarding nevertheless. And then also we continue to move forward with the grading policy, trying to, make some progress with that. So that's it for me.
Thank you.
Still mad that I
All
mentioned.
right, anyone else? All right, open board comment? All right. Public comment? Public comment?
Literally just arriving.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Sean Hood, 420 Lally, Sherman president, Sherman PTA president formerly, now just a regular parent, enjoying this role of not having to do all the work. I'm reaching out on behalf of 5th grade parents who have recently been informed through back channel and Facebook groups that they're no longer allowing teen teaching in 5th grade or the departmentalization of 5th grade.
Sorry, Ms. Hood, sorry, Emily, we can't take public comment on things that aren't on the agenda.
Oh, but it could be on the agenda because it's part of social studies curriculum that was just implemented.
Schedule wouldn't be that. So, but we did get your email. I know that I got your email. I'm sure everybody else did get your email, but this isn't, you can't just have public comment on things that are only for the agenda. But I totally read your email. I know that everyone else got it. You did send everything in, and
Okay,
happy to resubmit it. So I got the rotating, right?
Appreciate it, yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Thanks. All right. It's okay. No worries.
Thank you, Romeo, 237 Greenfield Street. So McKinley has been the target for at least the trigger for a lot of the conversations in redistricting and facilities has been the reasoning for not addressing these needs sooner. It has remained true that McKinley has needed some attention, whether it be test scores, race, capacity. And now that the racial imbalance law has been put on pause, we are still over class sizes, and our capacity in our school is very tight. So I am just hoping to draw some more attention to McKinley's urgent and immediate need to alleviate some of that capacity issue. Because even with the long-term facilities, that's great, but we still are currently from the new forces. So that's it. Thank you.
All right, adjournment, recommended motion that this regular meeting of the Board of Education adjourned. Motion, Mr. Peterson, second by Mrs. Rinaldi, all in favor. Happy summer, everyone. Don't forget.